All right. Hi. Hi, Sammy. Sammy, can you do a sound check for us? Can you hear me? Oh, dang, I got that thing on again. Hold on. There. Sammy, can you hear me? I don't know if she can hear me. She's not responding. I think when I pop chat out, it disconnects. Like it doesn't give me like the live version of it.
Sammy here, duck, duck, duck.
Right? Yes. Okay. How do you say that? Paddly? I hope I didn't kill the name. Hi, Paddly. Oh, you got you now. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Very cool. Oh, you guys, I have something I'm so excited about. We have Jax West with us today.
Hello, everybody.
Kat said hello. We'll give it a few minutes before we start getting into it and say hi to everybody. Jeannie says hiya. Ashley. Tony's on. That's Silkman, Dr. Silkman. He says hi, everyone. Silkman was going to be on the call, but unfortunately, he's like got robot voice because he's really bad sick.
Can relate.
I know you
Yeah.
can. By the way, Jax, you're a trooper. For you to be under the weather and you still look beautiful.
Well, I was at an event earlier today with a congressman and a senator, so
Oh, wow.
I had to clean up.
You had to get
Yeah.
pretty. Makeup
You
kind of
kind of
day.
have to look your best
Yep.
or
uh,
as good as you can. Yeah.
yeah. Out spreading the illness around.
Yep. There you go. That's a friend went with
You
me.
don't want to vote my way?
Yeah. I said to my friend right away who got, he went in the car with me too, and I'm like, I'm sick, just so you know, so don't get too close.
Okay, we are getting a sound check here, and they're reporting that Jax, you're very quiet.
Am
Is there
I?
any way to turn you up a little?
Well, I don't know. I can try and get closer to my.
That is better.
Is it better?
I do hear you a lot better when you're closer. I don't know why that would matter, but it does.
Get this close.
We'll be able to see up your nose.
uh,
Is that better, Ashley? Can you hear a little better on Jax? I can see her eyeball.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I could always.
Better. She said, yep, when you're closer, it's a lot better.
Okay.
Okay.
I can
And
always
so
change
does
it
Kat.
out too, so you don't see my picture. Then, if I'm too close and obnoxious.
Yeah. Yeah, you can always switch to your icon if you like. Sammy says, I can hear you all.
All right.
All right. Okay, let's see. Whoop. All right, you guys. So I'm so excited. Okay, Jeannie wrote real quick. We'll get into this. When will we get news from Zellner? Something to lift our spirits. Thanks. Well, actually, she's not the one that's holding the news right now. We're waiting on the circuit court. Correct, Jax? That's what the big holdup is the circuit
Correct.
court.
Right. Yeah, we're waiting for Judge Flowers.
Okay, so when we went through some of the last paperwork, it was more or less when Zellner responded that it wasn't even the state's position at that point to have put anything out there. Is that what your take was as well?
Yeah, that's she tweeted something about that, didn't she? Saying that
Hmm.
and and then it was also, yeah, in another response she did that there was no reason for the state to respond, and so she was taking some nice catty pot shots at him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When so okay, I see. When will he have something for us? We should have already had it technically by the second, is my understanding. So I'm not quite sure, why we haven't, but or what the holdup is. But the state is, I mean, circuit court has not responded in the time that they were requested to do so. For all of you interested, Jax West has two face groups, and both of them are on there. We have Tony sharing the links for you. She has Man Gossip, and then she also has the Stephen Avery Project. Duck love to you too, Courtney. Okay. So we're going to involve the crowd as well in questions. So if you have a question for Jax, she is our special guest, and please do type it out. And Tony, he's going to be sharing the links with you. I'm going to be watching chat. And so when I see a question, I'll do my best to call it out for Jax. If she's in the middle of answering another one, I'll try my best to remember your question when she's done. Okay. But for now, okay. So Jax, I want to just say thank you so much for coming on, because I've watched you from like the very beginning of my little world, and you've always been like this amazing person. I know that, what, Gretchy? I know that, like, if I had a Christmas list, as a kid, my version would be Jax West coming on here and doing this. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Well,
Yes.
thank you for the nice words.
You are a big deal to me, a very big deal. So, how can I ask you some personal questions about how you got started in MAM? Like, at what moment did it kind of happen for you that you were like, oh, I've got to get into this and participate?
Well, so I've always been somebody that was interested in true crime stories. And my boyfriend does snow plowing, so he's gone, if we get snow, he's gone for a period of time, and I'm here by myself and not going anywhere, so looking for something to binge watch. And I was on Facebook, and somebody posted, "Oh my god, people should watch this Making a Murderer." And this was when it first came out. So it was the weekend when it came out. So I knew nothing about the case. I knew nothing what Making a Murderer was going to cover. None of it. So I went into it a fresh sponge. So I watched it and just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I ended up binge watching all 10 episodes from start to finish. And then afterwards, I'm in Illinois, so I'm not far from Manitowoc. And so I'm like, okay, where is this case now? Is he still in prison? What is going on? And so that's when I discovered Reddit for the first time. I'd never been on Reddit, and I fell down the Reddit rabbit hole, and then looking at stuff that I could find on Facebook. Skip Tap was crowdsourcing to get the court documents, and so I donated towards that because I wanted to read and see everything for myself. um you know I don't need anybody to tell me what to think. I wanted to see it for myself on what was going on. And the more that I looked into the case, the more it was, these people are innocent, and this is so wrong that they're in prison for this. And the next thing that happened is Fassbender and Wiegert were going to be speaking at a law enforcement convention just the next town over from me. And Curtis Bussey, who started Stephen Avery Project, he had made a post about it saying, if I scheduled a protest for this, would anybody be interested? And so then I responded to him saying, I actually live right next to it. So what can I do to help you? And he responded to me immediately. And then things have just snowballed for me from there, from, going to the salvage yard, meeting different people in the family. I used to talk to Brendan on the phone. I now talk to Stephen on the phone, and I have visited him only once so far. I'm scheduled to go visit him soon. Um, so it's just come from me being just like everybody else out there who became a supporter from watching Making a Murderer, that, and just knowing this wasn't right, and what can I do to help? And it's just gone from there.
Well, it's quite a long journey actually, and the short amount of time that we've all kind of from, I guess it's called old school to me. You've got old school, which is MAM 1, and then you've got a newer crowd in MAM 2. But does it seem like, I mean, it seems like we've been in this forever, but really when a person sits down, it's been about 4 years for most of us. Um, I was like you, I did the same thing. Sat down, it was right after Christmas, and somebody was like, "You gotta see this." And I'm like, "What is it?" I don't do TV, I don't do movies. I'm not that kind of person. I don't have the attention span of a gnat. The next thing I know, it was like that little post you see on Facebook where you've lost, 20 hours of your life and you're just sitting there with your jaw open.
Mm.
So, so
I found the first 2 episodes really hard to get through, but after that, I absolutely loved it.
yeah, it's been an intense roller coaster. So, Jax, at one point you had to have gone from where you were involved there to actually now you run 2 groups on Facebook, correct?
I also have Free Brendan, so there would be 3. And Stephen Avery Project, we have both the public page and a closed group. And then the Ma'am Gossip is just a closed group. And I started the gossip group because there's so much involved in this case that goes out into drama and all this yuck. And the typical Ma'am fan, they don't care about any of that. And so we keep Stephen Avery Project just about the case, not any of the other stuff that surrounds it, the soap opera stuff. But I still wanted a place so that stuff could be discussed. And we also, in the gossip group, will discuss other cases or other Netflix shows. So that goes really off into a big, broader thing. But something that people always have to be aware of, that, because, when you're online, there's people that um can be mean. And when somebody will post a question about the case, you'll have some people go, "Cuh, that's already been asked and answered a million times." Well, we have at Stephen Avery Project, we're coming up on 200,000 followers, and every day we get messages, private messages from people who have watched the first part 1 for the first time. So they're brand new to it. Every day somebody
That's
new
incredible.
watching this. So
That's just that I find that so intriguing.
right.
It's
So
like,
when
somebody getting to learn to ride the bike for the first time or something. It's
right,
shocking to me. It's
right,
still shocking to me that the whole world doesn't know.
right. But that's where people like you and I, as you call old school, you know, instead of trying to shame these people on how come you didn't know that, you go, wait, here, because, try and remember what it was like when you first watched it, and now you wanted to find these documents or this or that. You should be leading them to that, not trying to ridicule them that where have you been? Because it is all around the world. People are watching it for the very
I
first time.
I agree fully with you, man. Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
And that's why one of the main reasons, honestly, that we opened the library, because if you are old school, you already got everything in there. But it was that we would, the more we were um, coming in contact with new people, they'd say, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Oh, I never heard that." And so we didn't want them to just go through and only hear it, because then a lot of things could be told them incorrectly. And so what we decided was, if we put everything we could get our hands on into the library, that way, if we give them some information, we can also say, and here's a great place to find it.
Exactly. Yes.
So, all right. You actually are very much a part of the grain of what has happened with the family in a sense, because you've actually intertwined a little bit of your life. And a lot of us have never even thought of that, but you actually know Earl, you actually know Mama Avery, you know Chuck, you know Carla, you know Stephen, and you've actually had relationships with them. And so I guess that's such a unique perspective that it does draw me a little bit. One of the things we've always considered was, what would it be like to really be on the property and stuff and actually go through things. So have you ever actually walked down in the salvage yard part, or is that more like they save that for business and people aren't allowed down there? How's that work?
I have walked through the salvage yard twice. And I did a video both times because I wanted to, like, my very first time doing it, I wanted to time how long it would take me to go from the office to where the RAV4 was. I'm just going to say planted because I'm not going
Okay, right, we agree.
to.
How long did
So
it take you?
it took me 10 minutes. Okay. So and it took, didn't it take Pam Sturm of God like 20 minutes, right? I believe it was 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Um
she talked to Earl, and then 20 minutes later she said she found it.
right. So I believe from the 10 minutes it took me to go, now mind you, when I went from the office to where the RAV4 was, I went directly there. I wasn't stopping to look in any cars. And I wasn't afraid for my life. Where Sturm had said something about, being scared and stuff, so I'm not scared because my first time there, I was actually walking through the salvage yard with Carla and her husband, Stacy, so I have full permission to be there, so I'm not worried for my well-being, and I'm not looking for my cousin, either her vehicle or her body in a vehicle. And so if it's only taking me 10 minutes to go directly there, there is no way for her to get from the office to there in 20 minutes because that's also the farthest corner away. And so you're passing by a ton of cars. It makes no sense on why you. So is she going to say she just walked past all these cars and you didn't look at them? What did you do here? And also, when I walked through the salvage yard, there wasn't as many cars there now as there was back then. So more cars to look through. Then another thing you need to realize is where the RAV4 was found, there is a pond. So when you're walking through the yard, there's all these lines of cars. Then there is this pond that's surrounded by trees. And then there's that little road where it's the very end of the property because the quarry is right there. 5 feet over from it is the quarry. So you're not even seeing that road if you're walking through there. So it just makes no sense on why you're walking directly over there on the other side of the pond unless somebody was telling you where to go.
Jax, when we were doing our castle report on one of those daily reads we do, I thought it was interesting because one of the officers was being directed verbally, without ever even knowing the Avery property, how to find the RAV. And it was really weird because he said it, and the officer repeated it even in his report very distinctly, like really made a note of it, that he said, you must stay in the left tire lane and it'll take you right to the RAV.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
I wondered, you know, if somebody knew that it was planted and they were working with Pam and they wanted her to be able to find it if she didn't know where it was, could they have said the same thing to her that maybe they said or that they did say to this investigator, they said, you must walk in the left tire lane. So I thought that was kind of, you know,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know. We're reading the cast. So we're up to about 200 this time. Whew.
Oh, geez. Well,
Yeah.
where the RAV4 was found back then too is that's when that road would go right through the quarry, so, and Carla had told me, and this is when I was on good terms with Carla, that everybody knew the road from the quarry went right into the salvage yard because in her teen years they would have parties back there, and it's not seen from the residences, so she could invite, people back there to hang out and do whatever you do when you're a teenager. And, everybody knew how to access that by going through the back way. And so then nobody who's living in the trailers know the people are back there. So it, and with the RAV4 too is pointed in opposite direction that all the other cars that are parked there. Well, that's the same direction you'd be going if you were coming from the quarry. So it's just clear to me it was planted there.
Yeah. We've kind of gotten to the point to where there's not many of us that don't follow suit with the idea that the entire RAB situation feels like a stage, you know? Um, but what's interesting is I was sitting here thinking about, we've kind of went back and forth on this whole quarry thing. Now, yes, that's where the pelvic bones were found. But what we're really kind of wondering is, so a couple times people have brought up the machinery down there would be running because they were working in the quarry until all hours of the night. But then we had other people come on that actually are in the business and say there's actually a curfew that they can no longer, because of a sound ordinance or something, that they have to shut off by a certain time. So do you know
Interesting.
which way it would be?
No, I don't know which way it would be, but I also know I've driven through that quarry.
Yep.
It's huge and it is full of trees, and it's just, if you were going, if you've committed this crime and you're in that quarry, the car could have been hidden in that quarry and nobody would have ever found it. Same thing with where the RAV4 was found. That pond that's right in front of it is deep enough that you could have put the RAV in there and it would have been fully submerged and you wouldn't see that.
Yeah.
And then I also know from talking with the family that you would have crushed, if you wanted to hide that car, you would crush the car, it would put it down into this, little box, and then you would put it inside another vehicle, and then you would crush that, and again it would never be seen from. So it's really stupid to me that people would say that Steven did this, yet that car is just sitting there in the open. And not only is that car just sitting out in the open, they did everything they could to make it stick out so it would be obvious it was there. And then, so if it was Steven that did it, and I know an excuse has been used that he couldn't use the car crusher when people were still around and he had to wait for a good opportunity. So what does he do when his family's all leaving and going to Crivets? He goes with them and leaves stuff, this car just sitting out there for people to find. He doesn't take that opportunity to stay home and crush that car when nobody else is around.
Yeah.
Right. And he's supposed to be such a thorough house cleaner that
Well, and we all know he knew how to crush rap because him and Earl both talked about how he had crushed that little blue vehicle somewhere around the 3rd of November and it was still in the crusher. So if he wanted to, he even said himself in one of the interviews, why wouldn't I have just crushed her car? Yeah, it doesn't work. And plus, if anybody ever walks through the timeline of how many individuals interrupt Stephen's day, whether he's calling somebody and they're on the phone, or he's somebody has walked up or drove up, the time would not be there for him to commit the crime. Plus, he would never be able to hide the RAV in the sense that there would have been no time. Mama Avery shows up. She's got the mail, which Brendan was supposed to be bringing, remember? But apparently the mail runs twice a day over there. I don't know. I'm just saying. And the investigator week or Fassbender, they get mail twice a day. Um, so, I totally agree. There's just absolutely no chance in the world Steve did this. 100% innocent. And I find it really fascinating when when you look at this case and you look at in 1985 all the hell he went through, and you have the same lab technician in both cases.
Ugh.
Yeah, Sherry
Yeah.
Colhane,
Yeah. Big hair.
big hair lady.
Yeah.
Yeah,
None of them should have been a part of it. And were told not to be a part of it, yet they all were.
Yeah, except for the coroner. She's the only one that it matters that there might be a problem.
well, you could always be like King Kratz just recently said,
Uh,
and the coroner's only there to quote kick the body. Was that did
that's
I don't.
and I talked to Steven about that the other day. Because I never on Stephen Avery Project, I don't want to promote any of the guilter stuff. And so I've always looked at that convicting a murderer as being a guilter thing. And so somebody had posted that in the gossip group. And I hadn't watched it because it's got, gossip again, like I said, there's more leeway for that. So go ahead and post that so people can discuss it, but I'm not going to watch it. And so then somebody told me, no, you should watch this. And I couldn't
Yeah.
believe what I saw. And I told Steven about it, and he said, yeah, share that because you never know if it's something that could help Kathleen. And, the more Kratz talks, the more he could just be getting himself in trouble. So let him hang himself.
Hey Jackson, we have a couple people just mentioning it's hard to hear you. So if you might want to bring up a little closer to your mic because we enjoy what you have to say. We want to hear you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually found it really interesting to look into what qualifications a coroner has in the US, because in Australia, our coroners are very highly qualified. But it was actually very interesting to see that it differs between states in America. And that was something that, again, as an overseas person, it was really interesting to look at, because from overseas, I've had to learn all about the different legal system, what a sheriff is compared to like a police officer, because we don't have that here. But that was a really interesting thing, because when he said that, I thought, oh my goodness, that is so rude, because our coroners here are very highly qualified doctors. So they are more qualified than your average doctor. Whereas in the US, some of them don't even have a medical qualification. So some of them are nurses.
Yep.
So so that was very interesting for me, because I must admit I had assumed that a coroner.
Yes, and here in this state, in fact, they can be nurses.
Did you guys know? I mean, some people know this, some people don't. But actually, you don't have to pass the state bar to be a lawyer in Wisconsin.
That was good learning.
Well,
Yeah.
but you have to have attended one of two colleges to be able to not take the
Yeah,
bar.
but you should still have to pass and get a license like that.
It's the
You've got
only
people's
state,
lives
too.
there.
Only state in US?
Wisconsin is the only state that has that you don't have to pass the bar.
Yes.
Right.
Which says that it's not universally accepted, doesn't it?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the coroner, it was part 2 that, I knew stuff about the coroner, but it wasn't until seeing her in that I was so upset for her and what was done to her, and lost her job over it, and to know, coroners are elected, and that was her job. That was her crime scene. And for them to keep her away from it, it's just again showing that they're corrupt and something not right was going on there.
That was
I
the
totally
biggest
agree.
sign for me. At that point, I went, something is really, really wrong here. And I rewatched everything. It was exactly that point.
I want to give a shout out real quick to those on the chat. And Eric Cozy has joined us tonight. Thank you. And we appreciate you coming on and visiting with us. He says during Mammothon, Tracy had a guest who is a forensic examiner in Wisconsin. So that's very cool.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, yes. And Courtney Skinner says Mike Glazer is a nurse. My impression, and I could be wrong on this, but the last I checked, he had the license as an anesthesiologist, and then he also had another credential. So he was a little higher than just a nurse, but I do know that his main title does technically qualify him as a nurse. Tony says, what a disgusting thing to say about a coroner.
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
But it's bad to say about
Definitely.
anyone in an official
What
capacity.
professional person speaks like that? You know.
Are you on crack? Maybe we should say that to him. Because
Ugh.
that's a nice thing to say to someone, isn't it?
Hey, Rat.
Hey, yeah, are you on Kratz? I want to mention this. Linda says, I always thought they would tarp the RAV. Why would they just throw some boards or limbs on it if they wanted to hide it? Makes no sense. One of my own thoughts on that, and I didn't like think this up myself, but I've heard it and it's just stuck with me, is there's a general consensus as to the big question would be if you're hiding that vehicle, if you're the killer, why would you leave the tire cover on the back that literally has giant letters showing that says RAV4?
Right, exactly.
Right. Well, has it ever been determined for sure on what was on Ryan Hilgas's hands? Because I know it looks like scratches, and then I know a defense was stuff like notes he had written on his hand. Has that ever been
Phone
determined
numbers,
for sure?
I think is what they said, that he had a list of phone numbers. I call bullshit on that.
Well, the reason I have a problem with it being writing is because if you look, it's actually in very specific placement on one hand, and there actually is a tail sign of it on the other hand. So what bothered me was if you looked at the way, and you can get photographs of this and you can look at it, on one hand, it's just the pinky, and it's on
Yeah.
its edge of the pinky. And then on the other hand, it's on the back of the hand, and it looks, I'll admit, to me personally, I would say that looks like claw marks. Well, so we were doing a little kind of like reconstruction, if you will. And if somebody is choking someone that has a smaller neck, okay, I'm just gonna say it. If the person is choking another person and it's a smaller neck and they have a little bit bigger hands, like a man on a woman, you would actually naturally you're covering one hand with your other hand, and your pinky kind of slips out and gets exposed. So that's always bothered me. That on one hand we see that little mark on the pinky, and then we
Just saying. Yeah.
just saying, it bothers me personally. So
Well, what I always thought, because I am of the belief that Ryan Hilgas helped plant the RAV at the salvage yard, and so I feel that the marks on his hands are from putting the wood and the hood and whatever it was to make the RAV4 stand out or whatever. It was him doing it at night, doing it quick, all worried. And so he got scratches, he cut himself up a little bit, grabbing
Right,
that
it
stuff
could
and putting
very
it on the
well
RAV.
be from a bush. I feel it could be very well from a bush. But I wouldn't say claws. I'd say if you're going to go that avenue, I wouldn't use the word claw marks. I'd use the word fingernail marks.
there you go.
Like
Yeah.
on
What
Bobby's
about,
back.
Yeah, like on
Those
Bobby's back.
were claw marks. Those were skinny in nature, though.
hang on,
Yeah.
what about Labrador? What about a Labrador puppy? Could they be Labrador puppy scratches?
Right?
Sorry.
One other thing that I've heard people mention that could have possibly caused the scratches on Ryan is now I personally have not been able to track this down. So this is a rumor. This is unvalidated. But supposedly, we had an interview at one time that was on a newspaper or a magazine that would have been with one of Teresa's friends that was going to meet her for Halloween. And she stated that it was either previous Friday or Saturday night before the 31st that Ryan Hilligus showed up at a party and Brad Scheck was there. And the rumor had it is that these two got into it.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that was the
as in
rumor.
fist fight, that they were in
As
an
in
actual fist
fisticuffs and
fight.
yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently this lady had stated in her interview, like I said, I have no fact on any of this, but it is interesting to know because that way, if you come across something, you know to snag a screenshot of it. I don't personally recommend saving links that much because unless they're your good friend, links tend to disappear when we start putting them out there for public knowledge. It's weird how they can just vanish or somebody's public records are real quickly sealed. So just a little ducky tip, I guess, is do some screenshots. But yeah, so there was supposedly some fight, but what she stated had led up to the fight was that Ryan had found out through Mike that this Bradley was going to be at the party. Now, I would have just left that alone at that rumor. But then when I was doing one of the video makeups and I was having to really dig into Bradley Scheck, turns out he's a married man at the time, and Teresa had been hired by him and his wife to take classy, nudie photographs in like a boudoir setting.
Right.
Well, then time elapses. You don't hear much about it. The next thing you find out is that Casey, the wife, goes to court. Now, I do know this for a fact, and she files a restraining order on Bradley. 5 days later, it must have been some heck of an ordeal because she immediately files for divorce 5 days later. But what brought me back to him was then, if you look it up, on the 28th of October, which is about 4 days from the 31st, 3 days, his divorce is finalized. So then it almost kind of bothered me because I'm like, that's the same time frame he's supposed to be supposedly in the room or getting this fight with Ryan. Well, then when you go to the interviews, where Bradley himself is getting interviewed and so forth, he has communication with Teresa earlier that day, even.
Yes.
Right.
So it just really
And
it makes
also
me wonder
had
about that
no
party.
alibi. Also had no alibi during
Would he have
the.
been celebrating that party? And then you look at the one situation where Teresa's room, they're collecting different things out of her room. The law enforcement is, and they find photographs in the trunk of Bradley and Casey with the negatives in the trunk by the bed. And I always thought, why would they not be in a file at work? It's almost like women tend to get a trunk when we're putting things in a safe spot.
Right. Well,
And the negatives there.
they,
mind you, I think it was her private business, not through Tom Pierce.
Correct.
So
Yeah, it
I
was.
don't
He
know.
was.
Pierce said she did a lot of her nude shots there
Well,
at the studio.
and it was stated that those pictures were originally taken at Tom Pierce's studio. So we do know that Tom knew about the pictures. I just find it suspicious. What came to my mind was we also learned that Teresa accompanied Bradley Scheck to court regarding the pictures and KC. But you don't get to hear how the court case went.
well, the whole thing is kind of touchy with, obviously Teresa is the victim here, no matter what you want to say that happened to her. We know that she hasn't been seen again since that time. So something's happened to her. So she's the victim, and you don't want to talk ill of the dead, and so most people won't touch that. John Ferrick, though, in his book Wrecking Crew,
Yeah.
did touch on Teresa. I mean, right from the get-go, his very first chapter. And
Mm.
I don't feel it's talking bad of Teresa because she was a single girl and live your life how you want, but
Mm.
she did have multiple sex partners, including Brad and his wife. They had a threesome, and then it became a twosome between just her and Brad. And she was also having sex with Scott Blodorn that nobody
Right?
ever talks about.
Well,
So
what brought me into the thought process of this whole buy her bed thing wasn't it has to do with victimology for me because to get to the killer, I've got to kind of know more about the victim. So what made me think about this safekeeping place is, um, would it have
Safekeeping. Oh,
provided
dear.
if Bradley and Teresa are going to court together in case he's showing up separate over these photographs, it could have been simply that Bradley said, "Here, hang on to these for safekeeping."
right,
But what
absolutely.
but what really bothers me when you look at this is we've never ever um oh, one of the
Not
kids is
mine.
home. Yeah, real life. Okay. Um we've never ever had really anybody in this case, whether they're an armchair sleuth or they're a researcher or they're a defense attorney or they're a prosecutor, nobody has ever mentioned, is it possible that we should have some female suspects?
Oh, right.
Because
No.
think about it. Okay,
Correct.
I'm a wife, all right? A woman comes into my life that I embrace into a very personal level of my life.
Mhm.
I then file a restraining order on my husband, file divorce, go to court for naked pictures. You follow me? Why, Casey
Right.
to me should have been a suspect. I think, in all
So
fairness,
should Bradley. I mean, he was
oh,
never a suspect
absolutely.
either.
No,
But see, none of that matters because they don't care who would be a suspect. They wanted to get rid of Steven. So therefore, no matter what there was, they were going to bend it to fit the narrative that Steven was guilty. So that's why nobody's ever talking about seriously any other suspects other than us now after seeing Making a Murderer.
And you
right.
know what?
Exactly.
I think it was bent so early that it was bent before the RAV4 was planted.
Okay, when
So
you say
that,
bent, I think that's Australian term that we're not quite as used to
well,
in
sorry,
America.
Jack's used it actually.
Okay, maybe it's
As,
just me. I don't know what that means. Bent. Gone
um,
wrong?
turned.
Okay, got you guys. Now I follow. I'm
So
gonna mute my
the,
mic and I'm gonna move Gretchen. You guys all know me by now. If I do a live, for some reason, I can be on Discord talk all I want. The dog doesn't care. If I do a live, she cries the whole time unless I like put her in her kennel. So I'm gonna do that. I'll let you guys talk for a few minutes. Also, you guys, you'll be seeing links. The links that are being supplied are directly if you're into the giving spirit, you want to be supportive on a monetary way. These links go directly to Zellner, and then Stephen has access when he gets in need. He can contact Zellner and she can release money to him.
That link actually takes you to a page that has two different
Thank
links,
you.
and you could choose to donate to Steve Avery's defense fund, which would be Kathleen Zellner, and or you can pick to donate to Steve's commissary. So the link for Kathleen Zellner will take you to either or.
Right. And that was actually something that I discussed with Kathleen because before she only had on there for the defense fund. And I said, there's all these people that want to help and give money. And I just want to make sure that it's going to a reputable spot. But when I direct it, to go to Kathleen, people are like, well, I don't want to give money to the legal defense they want to give it to Steven. So I'm like, so if you could just change something on there, it would make things so much easier,
Mm.
because even though, yes, if you give the money to Kathleen, if Steven needs money, Kathleen will give it to him. People still would much rather it go directly to Steven. So, yeah, so that's great. Yeah, that you can do it either way there. And
Right.
for
And
people,
it's his commissary fund, and if he needs socks or soap or,
right.
any
And also,
extras.
he can, give money to his family if he wants, or, if he's released, the money goes with him. So
I
Yep.
thought BB said sex. She said socks, right?
yes.
Socks. Yes.
Because you
Yes, it
said
was socks.
if he needs to pay for socks, but I seriously, when you hear this later, you're going to die laughing because it sounds like she says if he needs to pay for socks or something like that. And I'm like,
Oh,
what?
God.
Yeah, no, it was socks.
Okay.
Yeah,
See, it
yeah,
still
it
sounds
was
like you
socks.
say it. Oh, it's as bad as me saying dig site, but I said it too fast and everybody thought I said something else.
Uh,
Ooh.
Okay, if he needs to buy himself some underwear.
Can I,
Well, he doesn't wear them.
Yeah, that's
can I
true.
just comment on some of the things in the chat?
Yeah, let's.
Yes.
It's flying by,
Just
so we want to
just
join that
wanted,
too.
just wanted to go back to. I won't go back too far because I can just see some things now. Just commenting on Teresa's lifestyle choices that I mean, and it is a choice to be in multiple relationships and to, etc. And a lot of these were secret too. Some of her friends, I'm guessing, well, I know that, for example, her friend that led the detective to the photos didn't know Bradley's real name, only knew him as DJ. And that was quite interesting to me that she actually didn't tell her friends about his name, though that was a newer friend. But I think Tony's writing there that, yeah, okay, that actually puts her at high risk. And that's certainly something that a lot of people have said.
Yeah, and I think that that's been part of this case problem from the very beginning, is that in a normal case, there's a preset that you would do to be able to narrow down what you know different people. How do I put it? Victimology, because that way, how do you find a killer if you don't know anything about the victim, right?
absolutely.
Okay. I don't know how, but the dog is back in my room crying. I am so sorry, you guys. Braun, if you want to go ahead and address some of the chat things, go ahead
Yep,
and answer some questions. I'm going to take
that's
2
fine.
minutes to try to get Gretchen figured out. Thanks.
Yep. So Millbilly was talking about tunnel vision, and the other day someone had said on our chat that it was more than tunnel vision. It was actually about because tunnel vision is often where you focus on someone, but this was actually targeting.
Yeah,
So
I would say so too.
it was actively ignoring everyone apart from Stephen, whereas tunnel vision is where you narrow your focus in. Do you get what I mean, Jax? Is the difference?
Absolutely, because
Now my
they
dog's going for it.
they weren't just focusing on Steven. They were then, well, if you're of the belief I am, planting stuff to make him look guilty. The key, the bullet, that kind of thing. So tunnel vision is you're seeing that these facts all go to this one way. Targeting is, I'm going to put this key here and we're going to wipe this chapstick on here and there you go. So, yeah, he absolutely was targeted.
Make sure you put her in the garage. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because Sammy writes here she sounded carefree, and I'd have to agree that she sounded as though she had no idea of the
Young
risks she was
partying
taking.
girl, young partying girl.
Right. And, and I always have to put this out there to people, though. This isn't people victimizing the victim, because, again, I want to say she's a
No,
single
I
woman. Live her
totally
life.
agree.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
with
She's
her life,
25, for goodness sake. How many of us at 25 had any idea of, like, I mean, okay, maybe at 25 I did. Certainly at 18 I didn't have any idea of really the consequences of, yeah.
right?
And I myself, I happen to be one of those people who believe that she is actually alive.
Yeah, there's the the
Mm,
only thing I'd be surprised about if she it turned out that she was alive and was living in Canada, I'd be like, oh, okay. It wouldn't that because there's just so much in this case. The only thing I'm certain of is Stephen and Brendan's innocence. That's it.
Didn't do it right. Exactly.
yeah,
I have a lot of
completely.
questions regarding Carmen, and I get it. She's not related to Teresa in a blood sense. So
Yeah.
the mitochondrial DNA test with Karen Hollabach says, it doesn't say it's Teresa, but it does say that whatever they're testing for that tissue did match Karen Hollabach as it would need to be one of her kids.
Yeah, I want to know, did them swabs go through Sherry Side-Eye's
Yeah,
lab or not?
yeah, and wouldn't that be interesting to know?
Right.
Yeah.
I have a problem with the fact that I don't think Eisenberg nor Sherry Culhane could have had it because we find twice in the CASO that suggests that nothing was found till the 12th. And when you look at Eisenberg's report, she states she had the bones as early as the 10th. And then when you look at Culhane's, I believe it was the 11th that she quotes she has it. But then when we were talking with Tony,
And
he's done a go ahead.
didn't they also claim that they found it already by like the 8th or something, but then
Yep.
later they say, oh no, now we started finding it. That was just to stop the depositions.
Well, on the 12th, now no human bones were found in Stephen's pit that I'm aware of. All the human bones were found in the Dassey burn barrel, which wasn't even sitting next to Stephen's pit. However, when we were doing the CASO and they discover on the 11th 3 piles. They don't tell you what they are. We now know that the 3 piles contained bones, and one of them contained fragments, actually not huge fragments, very small pieces, but because we have such tiny, tiny, insignificant little tiny pieces, these in reference to those seem very large. We find pieces of the pelvic bone down there. But when you look at where they have found all the different pieces, actually, it's horrific. This is far beyond anything, any case Tony or Dr. Silkman or myself or a lot of us researchers have ever even imagined because you find if you go by the records and the GPS, we would have found the pelvic bone pieces would have been found in the Manitowoc Quarry. But then that's actually not directly right next to the Michaels materials area, but the Michaels material area, the guy states he found a long bone with flesh attached.
Huh.
And then 3 out of the 5 dogs hit on the area. They do not distinguish which dogs, if they were cadaver or living or what, or, rescue. But that's interesting. And then you got to go all and realize that the next time we hear about bones is in Dassey's burn barrel. So these are spread out really strangely to me.
Right. Well, and something didn't Kathleen say in the last year, I can't keep everything straight, but that there was like vegetation or something that was also in a burn barrel that isn't burned. So how is this
Yes.
stuff burned in there and then that stuff's not?
Well, and one of the big, big, big things that when I was looking through that just has me stopped in my tracks. And kudos to Eric Cozy for bringing on the gentleman that was talking about how Culhane has a document. So I followed up with what he had talked about. I did find the document. He actually nailed it perfectly. What has occurred is whether Sherry Culhane predated forms or not, That's not my business. What matters is if she was under some form of an audit, she would still get cited for this in such a major way because it's illegal as it can get, which is she predated, and Eric Cozy does a good job of bringing this out into the light and explaining it with the gentleman that was on his show that night, the guest. I think his name was Razor. Don't quote me. I kind of came in at the tail end. But so remember when Sherry Culhane coughs and spits on the bullet fragment, which is the FL?
Right.
Okay. She has to do something that she's never done before and she never does again, which is she has to write up what she did and she has to follow a protocol report stating, I've screwed this up, right?
Yep.
It's predated by 10 days to the date from the accident of her coughing and spitting on the bullet. So she fills out her forms and dates them. 10 days later is when she coughs. To me, that's like going into my insurance company, handing them $200, and they're like, "What's this for? You're all paid up." Well, I think I'm going to have an accident next Thursday.
Right. Yeah. Well, something else from my visits up to the salvage yard is people don't realize how close Steven's burn pit is to his garage. The law enforcement photos, like when you see Bear, because remember, they couldn't take pictures of anything before or get anywhere near anything because they were afraid of the dog. Um, it really makes it look like that burn pit is a decent distance away from the garage. It's not. It is right up there next to it. That garage is made out of particle board. So
Yeah,
if there's
it would have
any
burnt down.
fire, the 8-foot high fire, that garage would have burned down.
Yeah,
Plus, on the other side of it is the propane tank.
the propane tank. That's what I've always said. What the heck?
Yeah.
I still am stuck on the fact that I think all that ever was there is that we have a larger dog. A German Shepherd is not a poodle. So when you have that large of a dog, you have to literally, if you're going to put them outside, you have to have a heavier chain. And dogs pace. If they're on chain, they will pace at the extent of their chain. So if the chain is hooked to the doghouse, okay, or on a tie out stake, whatever it's hooked on, the radius is going to be a semicircle where this dog paces. And where that chain drags across there, you're going to get nothing but dirt because there's not going to be any grass that's going to live. So when Youst walks up and he says, "Oh, it came to me because the area looks suspicious," the only thought that can come to my head is he's never had an outside dog or even understands it, because I would have thought to myself, oh, there's a dog house, oh, there's a dog, he's on a heavy chain. There would have been nothing suspicious for me. So I just don't buy that he would have to be really dumb.
Right. Well, and
Well, yes.
I yeah, I asked Scott Toddock back when I was on good terms with him, how tall was this fire? What, because you changed it from this high to this high to this high. How tall, how really was that fire? And what he said to me was he doesn't even know. It's the cops kept pushing him.
Yeah.
And so that's why it changed all the time. So,
And I would actually believe that.
Oh, yeah. The pressure had to be so intense. I mean, think about the way that Barb answered when we have that recorded call on Ma'am 2. And she's saying some things on there. And Steven said, she's going to go where the evidence goes. And Barb says, well, then you're going to have a dead sister.
Yeah.
That's so scary. I don't know if if she's implying that she's just not going to be able to handle it anymore, or she's implying that it puts her in danger.
Well, I felt from my personal experience that it's just her trying to guilt Steven into doing what she wants. So she was trying to make it out like something would happen to her, whether or not it was Scott or herself. I don't think she thought that far ahead in it. She just wanted to prey on Steven's sympathies of stop this or else something's going to happen to me.
And I think, to be honest, I think the whole way along, she's just wanted it to all go away.
Yeah. Well, who wouldn't? Lord, this is a mess.
Who wouldn't? Exactly. But if you want it to all go away, you need to think through how to do that.
Yeah. And I think
And
when you have a
she
situation.
may or may not have had the capacity to. I mean, let's face it.
Exactly. And when you look at how underhanded this whole case has been, and this is the thing too. So let's look at this in a backwards way. Let's reverse engineer a little bit because, in the beginning, you don't really see the broader picture. But now we know that the state themselves are the ones that have approved these bones being given back to the Halbach. We know that that is against the retention law, the 97.4.06 law, which is the retention law that you must retain all biological evidence that was used during the time of trial where somebody gets incarcerated and found guilty. So you have to retain it. And I thought it was funny how the state made the comment in their stuff. That would mean we would have to hold on to everything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's the idea.
Idiots.
Anything that you've tagged and you put property tag on and it goes into your evidence, it still needs to be there because you took the time to put it through your good use. It still needs to be fair that the other individual, which it was used against, then can use that in the future to be able to prove their own innocence. That's a human right. That's just, in my book, a human right.
Well, I always tell people, put yourself in the other shoes. So just imagine if it was you or a loved one. Wouldn't you want that evidence retained? Yeah,
Oh my
you
God,
would.
yes.
Yeah.
But they were, in one document I read, they were complaining about the amount of evidence that this case had produced, thousands of photos that it had, and I know that Dietering was given overtime and extra time to go through the thousands of photos that they needed.
Boy, I'd like to see them
shelves put up.
thousands of photos.
They needed to put up extra shelves in the evidence room. So bloody what? Do it.
Well, if they're upset about the amount of evidence there is in the case, then maybe they shouldn't have fabricated so much.
Amen. Oh, pass the butter. Okay,
maybe
life's
they should have
over. That was the
collected
best
real stuff.
conversation. Seriously, Jax, you nailed it. They literally, okay, I have a huge issue with the concept, not how the evidence was necessarily collected, because they whatever, if they're dumb and they think this, this little hairbrush or something is important and they grab it, whatever. But it's when we get to Officer Joy, Matthew Joy, he takes the item that is already protected and already got a number or a label on it, tagged. He then repackages these items. Number one, we're looking at a huge risk of cross-contamination. If the individual, for one time out of all this 3,000 some odd pieces of evidence, if at one time this individual forgets to change their glove when they pick a new bag up, the environment is not set up for it. In talking to Dr. Silkman and other DNA specialists that I've heard and some things I've read, DNA does not just stick to its own little item. It also can almost become like an airborne, in a sense. It can transfer. And that's why I totally understand. So many people are like, well, when Culhane did the bullet testing, it really didn't affect the bullet at all because it was her negative standard that got affected. And can somebody mute their mic that has wind going on? Thank you. So you guys, what really happened is this. When you look at the negative standard, the negative getting contaminated by her cough, what that also is saying is the environment is not suitable, that you can guarantee no contamination has happened. Now, if the individual is already handling other DNA, maybe the victim's DNA prior, she does this test and the negative fails, it is preemptive then. I mean, you just automatically know that you now have put this other item at risk, the real item. And so there should have been a way back, because never, ever, ever would she have any reason to have used all that sample. Not once, not in any realm of any situation. She
Yeah.
did not need to use it. It got done that way, in my
That was
belief,
deliberate, I
bad
believe.
faith
Yeah.
intention. Yeah. I still,
Yeah.
nobody will be able to convince me personally that she didn't intentionally use up all the bullet and say, oops, now there's no more to test, and so forth.
Well, and her lab, and she makes so many mistakes. The
She has the
Teresa
highest
part of
error
the
rate.
DNA could be from her desk.
So, Jax, when I want to jump out of this whole little conversation a little bit, I'd like to know, does Stephen talk about when he gets out? Does he seem like, that's something that he really honestly can feel and stuff? Because I think I would lose hope.
Steven is like one of the most positive, happy people. Every time when I talk to him on the phone,
I can
he's
barely hear you, love.
every time I talk to Steven on the phone, he is laughing and in a good mood, and he always thinks he's getting out just around the corner. I don't know how he stays so positive, but I guess if you don't stay positive, I mean, that what a horrible life that is, to be all the gloom and doom. But no, he's all happy, and he knows the proof is there that he's innocent, and that he knows that he's got a warrior in Kathleen, and that Kathleen will not stop until she has him home. And so he's looking forward to being reunited with his parents, and having somewhat of a life finally.
That's amazing to hear. That just inspires me to work even harder. You guys, for all of us that have us, we all get frustrated in this case. And there are days when we wake up and we're like, man, I don't know if I can do this. I'm so sick of the state and I don't feel like we're ever going to win. Just remember, the people that are actually having to deal with the repercussion of the way the state has behaved have that kind of a positive attitude. That just gives you strength right there to keep pushing for public awareness. Keep making sure that the public, the whole world's watching these guys, because that's what's keeping them safe, is the whole world's watching. That's
Oh,
my view.
oh, absolutely. And that's what I say is crazy. Like when Brendan's conviction was overturned and they wouldn't let him out, it's Stephen and Brendan. There's nowhere on this earth that they could go to, that they could flee, and people not know who they are. These two men are extremely famous. So, um, everybody's watching, everybody knows them. There's nowhere they can hide, nor would they. These are simple people, so they're not going to go on this big journey, to go hide out somewhere or whatever. They're just not. They just want to be home with their family. That's it.
Yeah, I totally. Oh, that breaks
That
my
whole
heart.
idea, um, Jax, the whole idea of them being home, I guess I feel really quite emotional when I think about it, because I think of the risk. And how on earth can they be safe from all of this? Like, there is so much corruption, and there is no doubt that this was engineered. And
Yeah.
keeping them in, they have been kept in.
Well, and they've been muted, both of them, because that's the way that, get them in there, get them quiet so that they can't talk about, their phone calls are monitored, everything. They can't even seriously defend themselves because their words could be twisted and used against them. And there's so many mind games being played that I feel like that's what this public awareness is about, being their voice. Now, something Ronald Cass has offered, which I 100% agree. So he's talking about Sherry Culhane, and he says she played a charade with the bullet. since there was never Teresa DNA on it. She had to use up all the sample since a substitute was used. So in other words, we now know that when Zellner had her experts test the bullet, that we were unable to find any bone fragments whatsoever and no source of blood or anything noted there. But what we did find was wood. And so is that why Sherry Culhane screwed up the original test?
Yeah.
In my opinion, yep.
I agree, Sue. I am.
Excellent point.
Yep.
Thank you, Ronald, for that. Ronald's been with our channel for a very long time, and he always does bring up some really good points, and I appreciate that because like Jack said, it's not about who has read more or whatever. It's actually about those kind of points. You got to be able to put it in almost a tangible way for people to understand how these events are actually connected. And that's what our new release is, the new mini mam, is there's a lot of people that don't have 20 hours to sit down, or they don't think that it's going to be anything worth their time. So we tried to make a mini mam that's 20 minutes, and it doesn't replace mam. You'll still want to go watch mam, you guys, but it gives you that 20 minutes. Like if you're on a lunch break and it's 20 minutes a week, you can kind of grab it. You can get the gist of what's going on with the case. So what we did is we took the backlog of the case, which is this is what the state said in 1985. This is what what the prosecution as well as the defense said. And then we add in what we know today. So we've done that all the way through the entire case, all the way up to even the state giving away the Habak bones in the end. So this is a much more easier way if you only have a short amount of time, or you have a family member that says, well, I'll give you 20 minutes. You can be like, okay, just watch this, and it'll get them enough information. And we try to show like what I had to be like to be a kid, that yeah, you screwed up. You were kind of hot rodding around and breaking into a bar and acting stupid. And then all of a sudden it gets real serious because somebody else decides, since you aren't behaving, they're going to put this horrible crime of an attempted sexual assault, and attempted murder was the charge for Penny Bernston. That's insane that they knew. They had to have known that it was Gregory Allen. Dennis Vogel was the DA who prosecuted Stephen. He had prosecuted 2 years prior Gregory Allen. Plus, they were watching Gregory Allen because of his sexual appetite and because he was behaving so terribly and so forth. And they knew that the two guys, what they looked like. So they knew there was a difference. Yet, Stephen still picked for the crime. He's still picked for it, no matter what.
Well, it's because he had people in the right places who didn't like him. So,
Oh, yeah.
And I think ever since that thing with his cousin, Sandra, I think they've just made run after run after run after him.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I agree. Let's go ahead and look at some chat pieces here.
I was just while you're sorting that out, Jackie, I was having a chat with Millbilly last night and just saying the one thing I just can't get my head around is how on earth look, I understand what he did with his cousin wasn't right. It wasn't a good thing to do. Neither was, the behaviour with the cat, whatever involvement he had. I'm not justifying that. But how on earth does putting someone in prison for 36 years, how is that equivalent?
No,
It's
not. Yeah.
It blows my mind. I can never get my head around that. Such a power game.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to like Stephen personally. It's not about that. But when you look at the things of what he's actually done in his life, does not
Yes.
equate murdering somebody. So like for the judge to say that I think you're the worst person that I've ever had in this courtroom and your crimes are getting progressively worse. What crimes?
Stephen had never, ever, you guys, been convicted of any sexual crime ever before Penny.
Yeah.
And just like we said at the very end of Mini Ma'am, When he got out and he was exonerated, and it was proven after 18 hard years of prison, his wife had left him. She'd taken the kids. He was estranged from his family. They had had to move on to get the salvage yard going. Nobody, when he got out, was on his side, really. They were kind of like, oh, okay, you're out. Now, when you look at that, he had nothing to his name, and his name was shot. It was wrecked. And that's what you when you go back and you listen to the little tiny news bits that are out there of Stephen being interviewed when he begins to do the civil case, I don't think that came out of one penny of needing money. I honestly think he wanted to hear them say they were sorry,
Yep.
and they were refusing. They were refusing to even acknowledge they had done wrong. So when he did the civil suit, prior to that, he actually had kind of like interviews with Peg. So Peg Locken, I can never say her name, Lockenslager. Okay, so Peg Lockenslager was that's the best I got for you, I'm sorry. Um, but Peg, she was an important person in Wisconsin. She was our attorney general at the time. So she reviewed Stephen's case, and she came back with a flat out answer that he would get the predetermined preset amount of $25,000. That was it. There was not going to be any, I'm sorry, or we did anything wrong. And she actually went on the record to state there would be no charges, nor did she feel there needed to be any, that they had done what they thought at the time was proper. When Innocent Project took over and they took the civil case and they started digging into it, they started finding out, like, for instance, they found the note in Stephen's file that actually had Gregory Allen's name on it. So that connected the dots for everybody. And it went from like 450 or 25,000 to 450,000. Then it jumped up to like a million, then a million point four. And Stephen didn't have control of that. He was actually getting reported back from the Innocence Project what the number was going to be. So when they came back to him and said it was 36 million, I'm not sure what Stephen thought at that moment. I have
Well,
no idea.
I actually discussed the Innocence Project with Steven just yesterday on the phone. And um this is not going to be a good thing for me to say as an advocate for the wrongfully accused, but I'm quite upset with Wisconsin Innocence
Closer, a little
Project.
closer to the mic, Jax, please, love.
I'm upset with the Wisconsin Innocence Project for, yeah, what they did in the Penny Bernstein case was great, but the way they right away dropped him when the Teresa Hallback case came around without looking at into anything, that's infuriating to me. And Steven said, yeah, that whole task force, everything, they all just turned their back on him immediately. That it really upsets me.
And when you look at that, so obviously, I mean, well, before I knew nothing about the $36 million having anything to do with the Innocence Project. All the papers and the news was saying was that he had been exonerated of the crime, and that this man was suing for a large amount of money, and it was millions and stuff. And the immediately, I've been in Wisconsin for over 40 years. My immediate thought before any of this ever had occurred was be very cautious, because if you ask for too much, you just got done setting the new bar for the DNA for all the other individuals that are going to want their new DNA or their DNA retested by this new DNA test process and so forth. And what I was worried about is that the state of Wisconsin would turn around and somehow find a way to either re-incriminate him or do something to where he got back in prison. So right away, ooh, that's a big puppy. Right away, when the first time when I learned that the 25-year-old freelance photographer came up missing by his property, I was absolutely terrified for not only the victim, but for him, because I knew he was innocent. But then it all flipped on me. All of a sudden, the news came out. It was like 3 months later, and all they said was the FBI had confirmed that those were absolutely her bones. and this was Sheriff Bogle saying this, and
Mm.
that then Kratz went on with Sheriff Bogle on the nightly news during supper, and I almost choked on my baby peas. I kid you not. And Kratz told us, "Oh, turn your children away from the TV." Well, we couldn't see it, so we were like, "Whatever, let's keep eating." We were listening though, and that story he told of the brutal rape and the brutal murder, and then pools of blood in the raft. And they asked him, one of the press members said, "Pools of blood? Where are the pools of blood?" And he said, "Oh, under the seat, under the seat of the raft." You can still watch that today if you want. He literally says that. Kratz lied to the jury. He lied to the press. He poisoned the jury pool. I can't even handle that. He
Mhm.
ruined this case.
Criminal. What he did
Criminal.
was criminal.
Well,
Seriously.
it
I
happens all the time, and that's so I know we all focus on Stephen and Brendan's case making a murderer, but they're one of how many that this stuff happens to. It's
yes.
horrible.
I think you're
And
right,
can I
Jax. There's so many. Jax, you're working on a different case as well that I was curious on, and it had to do with sports. And did you want to kind of tell us a little bit about that as well?
Well,
may I just
Oh,
before
go ahead.
Jax,
Go
just
ahead.
before you do that, can I just briefly say that I think there's probably another reason why the Wisconsin Innocence Project pulled out, and it's something that I don't think anyone's actually highlighted, which is that the head of the Innocence Project was actually on the Crime Commission with Peg Lossenschlager.
That is true. That is absolutely true. And
And
yes.
I don't know why everyone keeps focusing on the fact that whatever his name is came and did one guest presentation when on that committee sits the head of the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
I mean, surely that is like much more important that they dropped Stephen like a hot potato. He was left without representation when those people knew all about his history. That made him look more guilty than anything, in my opinion.
Well, and the whole scenario where the judge recused themselves because of the fact that there was a civil suit from the Hallbox against Stephen right when he was going to get his 450,000. Now, I want to say it was about 180,000 was already right off the top was going to pay for the lawyer, Walt Kelly or whoever it was that had helped him to gain the amount that he had. So that left him 240, and that went over to Buting and Strain. Now, what I find interesting is in order for Stephen, the problem is that Stephen he was not eligible for a public defender because his assets legally put him over the bar because he got the 450,000 according to taxes.
Yeah.
However, he was penniless and they he was going to be left without any representation. It was just absolutely horrible. And so the judge actually had to recuse himself. And that's where we get I can't say her name proper, and I'm not meaning to disrespect her, but I don't
We'll say
have any
Peg.
respect for her anyway. I'm just going to call her Angela because her last name just is terrible. But that's where she stepped in. She gets involved in the civil suit. And now we know through all the legal beagle stuff, she is not supposed to be able to be on two cases like that where it's a conflict of interest. But nobody in this case cares about conflict, do they?
Oh,
Conflict of
God.
interest is nothing, right, Jax?
Right. No, not at all.
So, okay. So, can you kind of briefly bring us and the listeners together on what other project you're working on? I know it had to do, and I know a little bit more than I'm letting on because I want you to be able to explain it to them. But it has to do with a sports team as well as a female. And if you just kind of want to bring us through that.
That would be Marnie Yang. And that involves Sean Gale from the 85 Bears. The 85 Bears here in Illinois are royalty. And so Marnie was one of Sean Gale's, I guess you call them girlfriends, even though it's not a typical girlfriend type thing. Sean Gale had a lot of women that he would have sex with. So at the time of this murder, he had 17 women he was seeing. And so the one girl that he had, and he had been with her for 16 years. That's the thing, too. He's not just, these are temporary, one nighter things. He's with these women for a long time, that all these women seem to be okay with just having sex with the guy, and that's it. But one of them got pregnant and then was murdered. She was 7 months pregnant when she was shot to death. And Marnie Yang was the one that they took down for this, but 2 years after the murder. And there is a lot involved in that case to show her innocence. But if you Google her name, everything you find is she's totally guilty. And I went last week and had a meeting with her legal team because they're going to be filing for her in June to try and get her a new trial. So now I have heard and seen all the evidence to prove her innocence, but none of it can be shared at this time until the filing, because of course you don't want,
Right.
the state to know. But in talking about the stuff with Steven, I now saw at that meeting, I saw the crime scene photos, I saw the autopsy photos, and then I watched just the other night that the ID channel did an episode on this case. And so they said that Ronnie Ryder, who's the victim, was found on her back cradling her pregnant belly and trying to
Oh
protect her
God.
baby. And now I've seen the photos, and that is absolutely not true. She was on her face, so she
Oh
was, and then
yeah.
she was holding, because she was leaving her apartment. The person was lying in wait for her. And so she had a backpack on because she was going to the gym. She was a very health conscious person and worked out a lot. So she had all her gym stuff in her backpack. She was holding her keys and she had her purse and she was on her stomach. But when you look at what the ID channel put out, it makes it look even worse with this. Oh, this woman was cradling her unborn baby as she died. And so it just shows you that you can't believe everything that's out there because they're putting out a narrative to fit such and such. So,
Right.
um,
Now, Jax, correct me if I'm wrong. This is kind of what I understood when we talked about this previously, and I think it's important people understand. So, like if you look at the Stephen Avery case, one of my big things would be that if Brendan had been one of my children, this is how I would be. I would have actually been like, I did it as soon as they started messing with my kid. Nope, they nothing. I did it all. And that's what we see kind of in this case is that at first I thought there was something about like they were going to go after the son, and then she jumped in to protect him, and she volunteered that, "Oh, nope, nope, I did it, I did." Is that correct?
yes, because that is the biggest piece of evidence that they have against Marnie is she confessed. Now, she did not confess in the way like Brendan did. She was not in an interrogation room. She was at a Denny's restaurant with a friend of hers, and the friend was wired. And
Oh,
Marnie
gee.
confessed to her. But Marnie did that because, yes, she had a 16-year-old son who her son is half Asian. So he's got a dark complexion. And somebody had said they saw somebody fleeing the murder scene that was a male with a dark complexion and an afro. And so then for some reason the police started targeting her 16-year-old son. So that is when Marnie, just like in what Kratz did, there was all this stuff all over in the press saying this, that, or the other. So Marnie knew of all those things, so she said what they wanted, um, the narrative that they were pushing. Because now I visit Marnie in prison, and what she told me is that they were focusing on her son, so she was going to say whatever she could. So they stopped looking at her son, and she had complete faith in our system that she would have a lawyer and this would go to court, and she didn't do this, and she would be found not guilty.
Now,
And
Jax, is this a Wisconsin case or is this in another state?
this is in Illinois. This is an Illinois case because it's Chicago Bears. This is Lake County, Illinois, which is also the same area and has the
Yeah.
same players as the
Yeah.
Melissa Kaluzinski case, which is another one of Kathleen Zellner's cases.
I
So
was
it
going to
is,
say that.
yeah, so it is the same corrupt cop, George Flanko, who is the one that interrogated Melissa Kaluzinski, and
Oh,
that was involved in Marnie Yang's case.
And that's, what kills me is, and I get that they're trying to get out of $36 million in the Steve Avery case. I know that that's what their reasoning was. I'm sure there was way more to it, but that was part of it. But like in this case with Marnie, why not go after the real person that does it? Is it? I mean, I actually heard one of the lawyers say one time that the reason that they'll take a confession right away and go with it and run is because it spares them so much money and it spares
yeah.
them so much time, because then they don't have to do an investigation.
I don't have
They
to
just spared,
investigate
yeah,
anything.
they don't have to do anything.
Right.
They can just roll with it. So is that what we're seeing in the Marnie case? Or is there a nefarious reason behind them not truly seeking the individual that committed the crime?
Well, that would go towards Sean Gale, because I
Yeah.
believe Sean Gale was involved and he's famous. So they're not going to look at
They're
the
not going to go
famous
after the star if
right.
they can scoop somebody else up.
Right. And they did not go after Marnie until 2 years after this case. So all of a
Wow.
sudden, they now are going after Marnie. And it's because somebody who didn't like Marnie contacted the police and said, you should be looking at her for this. And that's
So
what
we
did
can
it.
kind of see a parallel there, because we have the situation with Sandra Morris where stuff went wrong with her. And, she was doing some things she shouldn't have been. She upset Steven. He went and did some stuff he shouldn't have done. So we have two wrongs. And what we see then later is we've got Judy Dvorak, who's Sandra Morris's good friend. And then Sandra Morris is also the wife of one of the deputies. And so all of the force of the Manitowoc County was seeing Steven, you know, in a whole different light in their view. And so I think what kind of crossed their mind was what he may have done if she didn't have the baby with him and he had said, get in my car with a gun. And I think they made up and imagined the worst of everything they could. And then later, everything they imagined and everything they would have said, we actually hear these tales from Kratz, and none of it can be backed up with any scientific evidence. It's literally like Kratz lied about the whole thing. Like he dreamed it, decided to go up there. He actually lies flat out to the jury.
Well, and even though
Lies.
Steve has been found innocent of Penny Bernstein's rape, they're still always very eager to try and bring up rape on him.
Well, yeah, and even think of Gene Kush. He sat there during the deposition, and if I've ever believed an embedded confession, it was said when he said, the guy asked him, well, we have DNA evidence that states that Stephen couldn't have done this. You do understand that that's DNA evidence, right? And it was something along those lines. And Gene Kush says, well, yeah, but DNA can be faked. Well, there's a embedded confession if I've ever heard it in my life.
He was so smarmy. Oh boy.
Smug and smarmy.
Yeah. And I mean, come on, look at his framed drawing. That
Yes,
is that
It was framed.
mugshot.
his framed
Yeah,
framework.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh my
Um,
God.
Jax, I just wanted to say that there's actually a case in Australia of a very high profile, she was high profile water polo player um, who's been convicted of murder, and she's been taken on by an innocence project now. There's no body, but I believe that the father of that baby, she said she gave the baby to the father. She's given two different names of the father, just a slightly different surname. She was actually assessed by a psychiatrist I worked with. I used to work in the prison system, and it was one of the psychiatrists I worked with there. And that psychiatrist said the key is that father's name, which is exactly what I thought when I was listening to the tapes, because she says a different name, which is unusual, very unusual. And I actually think the reason why they're not going after him is to protect him. I think he happens to be a very famous person. And so they're not
Aha.
going to go after him.
Yep. Makes sense.
Same situation. They will not target him. They will not go after him.
Well,
They'd prefer to leave him
the
in prison.
person who's higher up can afford a better legal team.
There will be no legal team because he will never be revealed, I believe.
Yeah. I
And I
agree.
believe she'll be paid off so that he'll never be revealed as well.
Mm. So sad.
Yeah, it
It's just
seems,
disgusting.
look at the Avery family. They weren't that well off. They were more of an eclectic family that stuck close to home. They weren't the high society people. And I
The
think you
opposite,
see
yeah.
that, yeah, you see that a lot in cases with wrongfully convicted, is you see
Yeah,
somebody that doesn't quite fit the notch to society in some other
yes,
people's eyes, and this prejudice seems to get formed. And it's amazing that more of us don't realize that we're one step away from Avery Road ourselves. I know we hear that, we don't realize that. So let's say, I've even, as Rubberducky, I don't know if you guys have ever thought about it, but those that are close to me know the reason I put a rubber duck up there and not my face. I have several reasons. One, very important one is I live in the heart of Wisconsin. I don't need any attention at all
mm,
because
mm,
what if, all of a sudden they did something like that? I'd be on Avery Road. It's like not in a million years.
yeah,
But it really bothers me how close we are to one step away. So when we get somebody like, you know, Dr. Silkman or somebody that can teach us skill set, so we know if our lawyer is doing the right job. That's why I listen to Travis. That's why I listen to Tracy. I want to know if that ever did occur, I want to be educated enough because I would have been as simple as Stephen when it came to court if this would have happened. I would have known what the lawyers should do, what they shouldn't do, what they were doing. I wouldn't know. But when you get in court and they start saying, well, look at these pants. These are the pants he murdered somebody in, let's say. You're sitting there, you're not going to be able to open your mouth and say, nope, those aren't my pants, you guys. Nope, you have to sit there and just let it roll. So we need to make sure we're wise enough to really get our ducks in a row. And I think that's also part of the public awareness that we do, not only to help those that are already wrongfully convicted, but to protect ourselves, to understand DNA a little bit better, to understand how evidence is done. And I'm still stuck on the fact that Matthew Joy is sitting there and he is right on site in a total unprepared environment and he's relabeling and repackaging evidence. So let's say 5 different investigators came in the last hour. I've got to go from possibly the victim's evidence straight to the suspects. And then when you get into the crime lab, we have the same crime technician doing both the RAV4 and Stephen's Grand Am with his blood in it at the same time.
mm.
Well, the best advice anybody can take from all of this is lawyer. One word, lawyer. No matter what you're being questioned for, you ask for a lawyer. But then you also have to remember, back onto the money thing, that if you're poor Brendan and you get one appointed for you, they don't truly work for you. They work for the state. So you're going to get somebody who's going to help the state try and solve their case and wrap their
Yeah,
case
So
up.
like
that would
good
be
old
called,
Lenny,
yeah, like Lynn Kaczynski. Okay,
Len
so
the cat Kerchinsky.
And to be
meow.
quite honest, I think that's why we're all in this, is because we realise that the system is so bloody broken. We have to promote justice. We have to get the system changed. You know, even from the
I think
ground
we
up,
need to get
we
the state
have to
crime lab
start.
protocols figured out as public. I think we need to be very aware of some things. Number one, and this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it is today. Our state crime labs in Wisconsin only get paid if they find the person convicted in court. If
Oh
the
my God.
person is found not guilty, the crime lab does not receive a dime for any of their work. So already we're predispositioning the tech under pressure to do a job that would help find this person, this individual guilty. Now is a conflict of interest, because a conflict of interest is simply the establishment that the outcome of the event you have an invested interest in. In other words, you're better off if one way or another happens. That's automatic conflict of interest, automatically supplies you with motive. So when you look at the crime lab, the way that's done, that's not going to work for me. Um, so
Oh,
I'm
talk about
trying
the
to,
blind testing also.
yep, what I'm starting in the last couple weeks, and I think we're going to be building more and more into a wave, is to start getting our crime lab onto an SOP system that also prevents them from having the exact same technician do the victim stuff as the suspects. So that would negate a lot of the cross contamination issues that you would have, especially being that we have more than one crime lab in the state of Wisconsin. Why wouldn't it be possible, and I'm sure it is, that one crime lab would actually be receiving just the suspect stuff and the other crime lab get the victims? That way, we never have the cross contamination risk that we're seeing in so many of these wrongful conviction cases. And I know a lot of our prisons are privately owned now, and there's actually big money in sending people to jail, which is horrific. But if you look at the fact that if we were to upfront start as the public is where we have to start. We have to, look at smoking cigarettes. Back 40 years ago, people were given, pregnant women cigarettes. Here, smoke this. And, it got to be to where so many people smoked and it was just a normal thing. Heck, you could be the nurse, go take blood pressures, go light up at your desk and smoke while you were putting your notes in your book. And it was nothing. And there was not really anybody. I mean, the tobacco industry was phenomenally huge, multi-billion-dollar business, and that's big industry to start putting down the kibosh on them getting as many sales, because people are going to quit smoking if they can't smoke here and here and here. And we did it. The public did it. Now smokers, they have to go outside to have a cigarette. Now I'm a smoker. I'm sorry, you guys, but I am. But we have to go outside. Doesn't matter the weather. If you want a cigarette, you get out there because you're not going to affect everybody here. But it was the public that made the change. And we changed it for our children. We've got them, look at today's youth coming up. Not even a quarter of them smoke compared to my generation. So our public mindset is what changes our laws.
Right. So criminal justice reform is huge. We need criminal justice reform. So what people need to do, you
A
need to
little
vote.
closer to the mic, Mike. A
You,
little closer to the mic, Jax.
yeah. People need to vote. You need to be looking at who is running for your attorney general, your lawyers, your coroners, you, all of your judges. You need to vote. And that's how you're going to help make these changes.
Well, and not only do you need to vote, because you could vote and not really understand who you're voting for. Like when you look at our Attorney General now, he's actually Peg Lockenschlocker's son. And none of us knew that
Didn't
when we
bother
voted
mention
him.
it until a couple days after he got elected.
Yeah. We all find out later that we haven't really chosen a different person. We had Peg, who obviously did not agree that the state or the county had done one thing wrong with Stephen on the first 18 years of his wrongful conviction. She said, no, you're going to get the standard 25. We didn't do anything wrong. And so then he got a civil suit. And right before the two last depositions that would have happened, which was Kachurik, which was the sheriff at the time, and you're going to hear this name again and again, Dennis Vogel. And Dennis Vogel was a DA that prosecuted Stephen in 1985. 1983, he prosecuted Gregory Allen. So he knew both men. He knew their mentality. He knew what he was doing. And, the thing about that is, how would we have known that any of that was going to be connected to our Attorney General we have now? So we almost need to kind of like, I hate to say it, but we need to dig into politics a little bit. Even if you don't like them, it's hard to pick a dirty turd out of a bucket, whatever you want to say. But to make sure that you don't get a dirtier turd than a non-dirtier turd, because I would not have voted for him had I known that his mother was Peg L. No way. I feel like in voting what I did, I just shooed in more of a problem. So if you're going to vote, be aware of who you're voting for. That's one thing I would suggest.
The other thing I think that is really significant for me in this case is realising that the difference in the systems. So in Australia, when we elect a jury, once a case starts, that jury is not allowed back in the community from the time that case starts.
Well,
so that jury is completely separated from the community.
Well, we have a lot of problems with the jury in the Steven Avery case, Bron. A lot.
Yes, and everyone's focusing on when they go into jury deliberation, and then they were, then someone came in and they were, infiltrated basically. But every single night of that trial, they went out into that community. They could talk to whoever, they could receive phone calls, they could make phone calls. Now, in our system, they can't do that. They're under very close scrutiny and they are completely separated from society, from the community for the entire trial. And yes, it's a long time, but it's to prevent that kind of stuff for the entire trial.
Right. Well, but in this case, it was, you had Kratz in that press conference, so he's, hurting the jury pool before there's even a jury pool.
Before it even started, exactly. I mean, it was, to be honest, it couldn't have even been moved state.
And really, the jury was stacked anyway, because there was one guy whose wife worked at the county clerk's office, and one guy was a
volunteer,
a volunteer sheriff. Yeah.
Well, and you've got Rimaker, who has his partner with him. They're guarding the doors to the jury. They're sequestered behind closed doors, and they're doing their little talk and trying to decide what they're going to do and all this. Rimaker lets in not his partner, but his partner's husband. And the husband brings in pizza. They're there. He's locked behind those doors with that jury for several hours. He went in around 9. It's reported that he left somewhere around 1 a.m.-ish.
Yeah,
and Rimaker gets reprimanded for that.
And there was a similar thing in Brandon's trial also.
Why is this not a retrial?
What I'm pointing out, I guess, is in terms of justice reform, that there are lots of aspects that we can focus on, and things like the way that I agree. I mean, press conference. That my understanding is that was unlawful, though. Is that correct? Because everything I've seen is that was unlawful.
Yeah,
it is.
This whole case. Okay. think of all the things that don't make sense in this case. All right. So, in any normal case, you are going to have to investigate all suspects because if you're a prosecutor or you're the state of Wisconsin, the problem will be that your defense attorney that you're up against is going to parade a ton of suspects in front of the jury to cause reasonable doubt. You only need one of them to have enough doubt that he won't, it's not unanimous, right? So
Mm.
they just naturally have no choice but to investigate so and so and so and so and so and keep proving that they can rule them out till pretty soon they've got it down to the guy they're looking for, which is the one they're supposed to be prosecuting in a normal case. Now, we don't know on November 3rd, November 4th, November 5th, any of those dates that we're going to have the Denny law at all. Yet they proceed to take the suspects that they choose, their first round of suspects, which was Earl Avery, Chuck Avery, Barb. At the time, they got a warrant for her as Avery, but she was a Yonda. So she just said, yeah, go ahead with it. They took Bobby Dassey and they took Pa Avery and Dolores, for God's sakes. They take them all down there with Steven. Now, what you get is you get a lot of DCI, so you can't even talk about Calumet or, Manitowoc at all right now. They weren't even there. So DCI is a Department of Criminal Investigation. It is your state. Okay, it's the state of Wisconsin special agents that are investigators. They're in charge of this. Immediately after all this evidence has been collected, the state crime lab gets a hold of one of the special agents and says, we need Steve Avery's DNA profile down here ASAP. And guess where all the other people's DNA test results went to? Calumet County, to the storage lockers.
Oh, geez.
Doesn't that seem strange to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Why would DNA go anywhere but a lab? What is the point? The minute that it doesn't go into an environment to be refrigerated because it's biological evidence, this case,
Hey,
guys,
it's just another day in Manitowoc.
I swear I'm going to write a poem about that. Just another day in Manitowoc.
Yeah.
So, for those of you that don't know a lot about Jax, I want to tell you one of the most magical moments I had in my life, you guys. So, I was getting ready for work one day, and I happened to have on Ma'am Gossip, and Jax was in a car, and she was actually driving around all over, and we could be on the live chat like you guys are, and she would go wherever we asked her to go. And so I was yelling out, "Oh, go to Carmen Botwell's house." And she said, "You know what? You get me the address. I'll go to Carmen Botwell's house." And Jax did it. And then she took us to Cuss Road. And let's see, where else did you go? Explain where all you went, Jackson. And then explain to our listeners what the other shoe kind of like what it fell and what happened with the rest of the story.
Well, okay, so I went up there. This was right after one of Kathleen's filings, and she had done her recreation video of how she thinks Bobby followed Teresa. So and everything involved in that. So I wanted to go to all those places. So we were going to Cuss Road. I did walk through the Rodont deer camp because I also wanted to show you just how close, if you were to look as the crow flies, how close the salvage yard is to Cuss Road. Because yes, when you have to drive the roads, it's longer. But when you're just
It's
looking,
17 minutes to drive the roads. I know that because one of the listeners that day had done it, and I remembered them putting how long it would take was 17 minutes to go from point A to point B versus what you were able to do.
okay, so So I went there, and then I went to where the RAV4 was reported to have been seen by the dam, when it was parked there for a couple of days.
Wasn't that like State Highway 147?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is also turns out it is now real close to where Barb and Scott Todek live. It's right by there where the RAV4 was left for a period of time.
How
So
interesting is that?
yeah. So I did all of that, and then a month later I get in the mail a ticket from Manitowoc Sheriff's Department saying I was caught trespassing, but the ticket would not tell me where they say I was. And it also didn't tell me who was filing this against me. So then I had to go all the way back up to Manitowoc for a court date, which they were really surprised that I went to because, like I said, this is a ticket. They expect you to just pay it, not to fight it. And so I go to court and I had to report to, it actually went to traffic court. And so I go to court, and so, but all that happens there is I had to plead not guilty. And so then I'm taken into another room with the assistant state's attorney and to explain myself. I'm not read my rights, but I am told that I am not your lawyer and anything you tell me can and will be used against you, but I'm not fully Mirandized. And so they're like, so you're going to plead not guilty? And I said, well, you're not telling me where you're saying I was. Because originally, too, the date on the ticket is a date that I know I was home. And I have a security system around my house. So I was able to pull up from my security camera showing proof that at the date and time in question, I am at home. So
this is brilliant.
Yeah. So I brought that on a thumb drive to give to them. And so I'm like, so are you going to tell me where I was and who filed this? And they said, no, they wouldn't tell me. And so then I had to get a new court date scheduled. So then for the new date, they told me I didn't have to go to Manitowoc, that I could do it over the phone. So I had to call in for that. And on that one, too, they still would not tell me when and where and who. And so now I had to ask in writing to see the evidence they have against me, and I had to pay for it.
But Jax, there is an amendment. I don't know if it's our 16th or 64th. It's on the end of one of my videos where I read it. And anytime, I don't know, was this considered criminal?
No, it's a ticket.
Okay, then this would have not been applied to that. I know if it's criminal by law, they have to tell you what, when, who, and where, and why.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
So finally, and of course, they wouldn't accept payment online or anything like that. I had to snail mail them a money order.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So then they mailed me back their evidence. And so it turns out it was Josh Rodant, who's the one that filed the trespassing charge, but only because Carla, who's always spying on me, was watching my live. And so she ran to Daddy Chuck and had Chuck call Rodant.
So you're talking about Carla Avery, who was Chuck Avery's, but now she's Chase, right? Carla Chase, I think.
Correct. She's Carla
Okay.
Chase, and she's
Okay.
Chuck Avery's daughter. So
Chuck is Steve's brother, and Earl is the other brother.
Right. So in Josh's statement was he got the call from Chuck Avery because his daughter told him to call. So I question this all the time on, all right, Stephen Avery Project. We are the biggest support page for Stephen. The video I was doing was for Stephen supporters. So why does Carla want me ticketed? Why does Carla want me stopped from I wasn't doing anything to hurt the Avery family or the case or anything like that.
Actually, you were helping us from an armchair sleuth perspective, having the visual of the way you were going about it, which was showing us on camera right around the area where we would have seen, because our group here, we're very, very into Cuss Road with all the activity there. So one of the parts that I found so helpful in this case is when you did the walkthrough between that little short distance where we were back a few minutes ago, we were talking about if you went the roadway, the highway, you're looking at 17 minutes. I think I said miles, but it was minutes. But if we went the route you took, which was plenty wide enough for a vehicle, and that's the thing is Cuss Road ends in a cul-de-sac. But then if you jog through this little, like, I don't want to call it a deer trail because that was pretty wide you were walking through.
A track,
That led,
maybe.
yeah, like you could drive a car through there, no problem. There was a quarry right there. Am I right, Jax? Am I remembering right?
Right, because the deer camp is part of the Redant gravel quarry. So it goes Avery Salvage Yard, quarry, deer camp. So they're all right there.
Can I ask a
Go
question,
ahead.
Jax, of why do you think the state keeps referring to the quarry as Redant's quarry when actually some of what they're talking about is Manitowoc Quarry?
Well, it's Manitowoc gravel pit, and I get confused on all of it too because
I'm sorry, that's what
right.
Sorry, that was my mistake. Thank you. Yeah.
So the quarry is the quarry is
The
first.
quarry is Redant's.
And so the quarry is the one, that's Rodon's, and that is what is right next to the salvage yard. The gravel pit's on the other side of the quarry.
Yeah. Well, and I think you kind of, when you said the word Manitowoc, I think you kind of answered your own question, Bron. I don't think the state of Wisconsin wants to call it the Manitowoc gravel or quarry because I think that then on their
they don't want
behalf,
to own it.
you got to look at it this way, you guys. When you're talking county, okay, so some of you aren't from America, and so I want to make sure you guys understand the ladder system. So when we say county, this is as if you're talking about the child. When you say state, it's like you're talking about the parent. And when you say federal, you're talking about the big daddy of them all. So if the state names its own, its own county, it's kind of like the mom calling out her own kid saying, yeah. So I think the state purposely changes it and calls it Redant, even though they'll put the GPS or the logistics of where exactly on a satellite these bones were found. You can look that up, and it is Manitowoc gravel pit. It
So it's
really
just a way
is.
of distancing themselves. Is that
just
what
like
you
the
think?
state. Just like the state, you guys, for all of you that don't even understand a lot of the court proceedings, I totally respect that because it's just sometimes lawyer stuff just gets really long-winded for me. However, if you just look at the big thing, it basically what the state has continued to do throughout this entire case is they'll go find one sentence out of an entire document and they'll take that one sentence, they'll pull it out, and they'll use that as their explanation. And then when you go look up their source is from like 1995 or 2001, and there's been so many updates since then. And even if you even look at that particular old document, It's within context. So when the state connects an attachment, they'll say this statement. They'll pull out one sentence and then they'll say, find attachment. A lot of times they won't attach the entire document. They'll just attach that one little paragraph that was said or something like that. What Zellner does is she goes back and gets the whole exhibit and you get the whole document. And boy, do you get a big view of what the state screwed up on. And that's the fact that they are taking old reports that say that the new DNA testing that we want to use on the bones, the Andy system, the state's claiming that it can only be done on a buccal swab when you're on the go. Yeah, when you look it up, that is not what the whole document said that they used. It literally, in the same sentence, they cut it, and they don't even tell you everything, is that it can also be used by two, you have to have two criteria met. The first criteria, it has to be an accredited lab. What do you think our state crime labs are, you guys? They've got the CODIS, they're accredited.
Mm.
And then next, you have to, if it's in the crime lab, you have to have, or I'm sorry, I misspoke. If it's an accredited lab, it has to be by somebody that, and I don't want to use a specific word you can quote me on, but it has to be somebody also accredited. They have to have the PhD or they have to be trained and skilled for the reading of that type of DNA. So the problem with what the state's trying to say and what they're trying to do, they're pulling the Andy system's own statements to say this. What we're trying to tell them is the guy that invented the Andy system is Dr. Selden. This is Zellner's big guy that's ready to do all this. He himself has put an affidavit out stating that the state is misinterpreting the documents and using them to their advantage under their own understanding. And they're trying to say things that is not being stated in the original document. And that he's also stating that this test could be done in 90 minutes. So for all of us that have had sleepless nights for the last 4 years, or like Stephen for the last, what, 14 years, it can be done in 90 minutes. And if you think back to 1985, September 10th, I'm sorry, September 10th, 2003, Stephen was, they by law said the test had to be done. Colhane was forced, her hand was forced to exonerate him because she had to actually submit it to the machine and she couldn't control the machine. So she just had to do it. She was court ordered. So she just submits it, comes back that it was not Stephen Avery. The very next day, September 11th, 2003, Stephen walked out them doors. In 24 hours, he went from a convict that nobody truly could guarantee that he didn't do it to within 24 hours released and exonerated. We could do it in 90 minutes. 90 minutes. Everybody could start getting some sleep. We could get over this. We could move on to a different case. We could, Dolores, oh, I'm going to cry. Dolores could see her baby.
Right.
Brendan could get out and play some video games and eat some pizza.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute. You guys can talk.
Well, I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that the family would treat you that way, and not only because you were taking a bunch of fans on a ride about a bunch of supporters, but you also your group is one of the few groups that is actively working on this anymore.
Right. Well, there's just people who want to be the ones to, that they want to be Steven's official whatever, fill in the
Yes.
blank here. And so they make things a competition. It shouldn't be a competition. It should be
No,
everybody
what
on
that
the same
happens
page.
everywhere in this case amongst everyone.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
I think
happen unless we let it happen, and we're not
right.
going to. Because honestly, what Jax does, she does it her way, is amazing. I actually support a lot of people. I may not agree that that's the way I want to go about it, There are some groups that are only fact oriented. If they don't read it, they don't talk about it. There are other groups that are only theory oriented, that they don't even care what the documents say. They talk about what could have, what would have. Our group, we take a theory, we walk through it, then we try to debunk it with all the evidence. We try to substantiate it. We try to see where the evidence leads us with that idea. So, as many different ways as we can go about the case, I think is brilliant. But I think what needs to happen, and I'm calling out to everybody, is I need everybody to start treating everybody with respect, indoors and outdoors, behind closed doors. And there's no reason for any member, whether they're Carla Chase, whoever this person is, or they're some other YouTuber. There's no reason for them to be paying attention to another YouTuber if they're really trying to help Stephen, or another Facebook person. They need to be getting the paperwork done. They need to be studying the case. If they're here to help, they need to be working on this case on public awareness, not worrying about what somebody else is doing. And a lot of the times you won't see us on too many of the channels because we don't want to interrupt another person's study. So for instance, if you know I try to sneak in to watch some of the other YouTubers because I like what they're saying, or I'll sneak into Jackson's and I'd be real quiet because I don't want to disrupt the study that's going on. And that's called respect. But I see so often somebody else will be worried about somebody else. And it's like a bunch of kids when you take them to get ice cream. They should all just be happy they're getting ice cream, but they're all picking about who else is going to get chocolate and what kind. And you just want to be like, nobody's getting ice cream, you know? Um, when you look at Brendan and you look at Steven, just remember everything, every minute you do something, it should be to support the case and not dismantle somebody else supporting the case.
Well, I have been attacked for as long as I've been involved in the case. I
I
mean,
do know
people
that's
have
true.
really
Yeah,
gone
me
into
too.
my personal life and have gone after me really bad. But I'm still here and they're not going to be able to chase me away because at the end of the day, no matter what they do to me, it's nothing like what Steven has been going through. And I
Yeah.
believe he is innocent. And I am here to help push his innocence into the world.
I respect
Yes.
that so much, and I respect you, Jax, because I know, and BB knows, and a lot of us know what you're saying is 100% true. You have been targeted in so many bizarre ways, sideswiped, and so forth. Um, and I have honestly had so much respect for you. When I first got in the case, back after Ma'am first came out, after a while, it was within a year, I got targeted as well. And I dropped offline. I didn't like it. I don't like any of my real personal life, my kids' lives, being a target. So I dropped off. And it got to the point that I was studying this stuff kind of like literally in a rabbit hole. Like I was in the dark almost in my room. I didn't even want family to know because they were getting nervous because we were starting to feel pressure. And my
Bust the
family wanted
yarn
me to
out.
walk away from the case immediately, protect everybody in the family, but I hardly could do it. And so I went underground from even my family and didn't let anybody know that as soon as the lights went out, I had my, phone, and I would download a document, get offline so I could read it. And it got to the point I couldn't take it anymore. So I got online and ended up contacting Jax in private. Now I won't say what all I told her, but I'm like, oh my God, I know I can trust you. The one person I can trust. Can you please get this to Zellner because I'm about ready to explode and I'm crying. And instead of Jax being like, you know what, you're crazy, go away, Jax stayed on that phone for over 2 hours and she took down all the information. She treated me with great amount of respect and she got it to Zellner. And thank you, Jax, for doing that.
Well, thank you. I tell people you never know. Fresh eyes or old eyes. Old eyes are important on this. You never know what somebody's going to find, what's going to click, what's going to be the thing. So you need all eyes on deck.
Yeah.
And everybody
And
has to keep combing through everything.
and if ever you guys doubt, and this is for all listeners across the world, if you ever doubt that one person can affect something in your life. Think of the fact when Carol Ann found that and got that over to Zellner, how one person opened up this whole avenue to where we've now got this whole situation. This is where human rights are being violated when it comes to Stephen and Brendan. The biological evidence of the victim has been destroyed. And how do you recover from that? There are no more human bones to go to the shelf from and say, well, we'll just grab this one and we'll do the same test.
Well,
No, they used Eisenberg's report and they gave what they could to the Hallbox. And now the state's trying to turn around and say, well, we might have given them animal bones. We don't know.
right.
Seriously?
That's the thing to remember in all this is that Kratz said, I'm not even going to spend 5 minutes talking
20
about these bones.
seconds.
Yeah.
20 seconds.
Yeah. So, but now you give it to the Hallback family in 2011. So that right there is telling you that Stephen's rights have been violated. He was not given a fair trial then, and he could not get one now because you've destroyed the evidence.
Yeah. And it's okay. So let's ask some questions. Why, you guys? Think of this. Let's just forget about the names of the individuals that are involved in the case for a minute. I just want you to ask yourself, why would the state of Wisconsin purposely, intentionally, knowingly hand over biological evidence of bones to a family? They can't turn around and say, well, we felt bad for the family, we wanted closure. If they then turn around and say, well, they might be, squirrel bones or rabbit bones or turkey bones, we don't know. No, it's a contradiction. So it's not because they wanted to do that. So we can get that out of there. Now, the next thing you have is, are they hiding the identity of the bones? And then you have to look at when the bones became found. Why didn't they have a camera on site? Were they hiding the identity of the bones? And then they're hiding the fact of the origin of where the bones were found. You got it when you got that 5 minute, when you said 5 minutes or 20 seconds for Kratz, that's exactly it. He doesn't want to talk about the pelvic bone that's down in the quarry, because if he does, we no longer can just simply have the jury look at Stephen. We would be looking at Scott Tadich. We would look at Bobby. We would look at Earl. We would look at Chuck. We would look at Martinio, and I can never say his name. What's his name?
Martinez.
Martinez. Martinez. Is that how I say it? Okay.
Martinez,
so we would be
yeah.
looking at him. We would be looking at Robert Fabian. We would be looking at Josh Randit. We would be looking at any single guest that was down there. We would be looking at all the workers down there. And the Denny Law would dissolve instantly.
Did you say Mike O? What about Mike O?
Yes,
Did you say him?
Millbilly will kick my butt if I don't bring that up. Bobby's best friend was Mike Osmondson. And Mike Osmondson, Mike Osmondson was the one that was spoke of in the trial when Bobby was discussing a joke. Now, what we have since learned is that Mike Osmondson and Bobby have attributed this joke to a date that would have taken place, according to Mike Osmondson, the joke would have taken place on the 10th of November. The problem with that, you guys, is Stephen was arrested on the 9th and would not have been on property. So if the joke happened, if they're being honest, and I doubt it, but if they are, if it happened on the 10th, who were they talking to? And who's the one that said, want to help me hide a body?
Yep. Well, something that I find very curious is you're giving these bones to the Hallback family 5 years later. It's one thing if it's like, okay, we're releasing this to you because this is the service and here, but it's 5-6 years later. Why? Because
I've got a theory. It's just a theory. It's my own little thinking process and all that. But that's when Ma'am was actually getting the cutting room floor was going on and they were creating Ma'am. and they knew it was going to be coming out in the near future. And I think that this is just Rubberducky saw it. I think their full intention was, wait a minute, the bullet, obviously, Culhane chooses, makes an actual decision that she did not need to do to use it all. Well, then when Zellner gets her experts on it, we don't have any evidence that that bullet was the murder weapon because we've removed the possibility of blood. We've removed the possibility of bone. We're only left with a few pieces of DNA that could be even tested, which is saliva. So that would mean that she either licked the bullet or it went touched her lips or something, wouldn't kill her at all. Or she had to pee on the bullet or semen, and she's a female, so that's out. So this bullet was not used to kill Teresa Halbach. FL is debunked 100%. So we don't have a bullet.
You heard it here
And
first.
what's that?
You heard it here first.
Well, not only when I say we've debunked it, but we don't have a bullet because Sherry used it all. So we can't even go back and prove our theory
Oh,
anymore.
true.
But we have proven, Zellner has, her team has proved that it didn't have Teresa Halbach's bone and it didn't have any blood. So when you look at that, the state's getting rid of evidence in a sense by having Sherry Culhane do this deviation. And me and Silkman, we have to agree to disagree a little bit on that. I personally know for a fact that this is nefarious in my own personal opinion. In my mind, it became factual when I've got more than 5 events of predating and I'm seeing a pattern. So I was trying to explain this in a debate with Dr. Silkman. I personally was looking at the timeline, and in the beginning, from the 3rd of November up until the 10th of November, I see a 2-day pattern. And what I mean by that is all events seem to happen 2 days later than the paperwork is reflecting. So it's being reported 2 days later. And then as you get further away from that date, the timeline stretches out, and still many, many, many events are happening way prior to the
Oh.
events actually being noted. And when you get to Sherry Culhane's paperwork, there it sits, big as a pink elephant in the room. We have a piece of paper that is stating that she is going to need approval for a deviation where she has contaminated the control sample. And it's 10 days prior till she contaminates it. So even if in the lab, and I get it, people probably in the lab, maybe they backdate stuff, maybe they're just sloppy with their paperwork. Guess what? You still have to remember that what you write on that line is what legally counts. And that counts for the only speeding ticket I ever got in my life. It wasn't even a speeding ticket. It was, I switched the plates to a different vehicle and I put the paperwork in my glove box and I sent the rest into the state. I got pulled over 2 days later, told you can't do that. You literally have to wait for the paperwork to come back. I went to court. I'm like, I don't no. Then the judge told me ignorance is no excuse in the eyes of the law.
No.
So I say to Sherry Culhane, your goose is cooked, little lady, because there's no ignorance is not going to get you away from it. You sign the form. It's in your own handwriting. It is 10 days prior to you having the accident. And unless you're psychic, we have a big problem. And I hope Zellner pushes that to the max because you have conflict of interest, Miss Sherry Culhane. You were the lab technician in 1985. You're the one, besides the witness, that misread or a deed the hair. And then you're the one that volunteers for the job in 2005. And you're the only one that's going to test all the Avery stuff. So you should have paid closer attention to what you were doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, Jax, I have a couple weird kind of off the cuff questions, but I want to grab a little bit of the chat over here. It's a lot about the DNA over here. So I know that they're both doing a lot of bantering in there about kind of like what we've been talking about. Let's see. Is it true Jason Zipper is gone? So I don't want to comment too much on the zippers because that has not been my strongest study. Jax, do you know anything about Jason Zipper having taken his own life?
Yes, that is true. He did commit suicide.
Now, I heard a rumor And I say rumors when it's not validated by any paperwork. I heard a rumor that it was within the property that he had hung himself. Is that possible?
That's what I heard as well.
Okay. Now I do know Jason Zipperer did take down his garage. So I always kind of wondered if possibly he just didn't want the memory of anything. Maybe it took place somewhere near there.
The garage came down well before Jason Zipper killing himself.
Oh, great to know.
He killed himself last year, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that it was recent, and I believe it was the kid was depressed, and I believe it was like a girlfriend issue.
Okay, Griffin says that he committed suicide 12/20/2017. That's sad. That is sad. Um, let's see what else we got. Didn't their garage catch on fire too shortly after? I don't know about that.
Yeah, the garage did catch fire at some point, and and then they built the new garage.
I have to kind of second Rachel's statement. Wow, how convenient. Just when Zellner's getting ready to luminol some garages. Oops. That is like I said, I can't say the word coincidence anymore because it kind of like my want to bite my teeth in half at this point after I've said it so many thousands of times in this case. So I'm just going to say it's suspicious to me.
Well, the garage was rebuilt before Zellner was even on the case.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, this is great. I'm so glad I've got you here because, there's so much to this case. You just don't know for sure. And so you're trying to keep all your facts in one area. You're trying to keep this other information on the side so that as the information comes in, whether it's validated or not, you know where to file it. And it helps to really clear this up. I guess that brings me to a question that I've heard. I've heard that when Scott Tadich goes to the rallies, that he's picking his cigarette butts up.
That is correct, because Carla had threatened at some point that she was going to get his cigarette butt and to submit that.
Why can't we get a subpoena just to get all the DNA of anybody at that timeline? I just don't get that.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's clear that there's issues with Scott. And why does he refuse to turn if you're innocent, why don't you give your DNA? Or why don't you talk to Kathleen? That's the thing that I don't understand on
why not work with Kathleen?
Right.
If you're innocent, what do you have to fear?
Right. Not from Kathleen. I get it if you're going to be suspicious of law enforcement because
But Kathleen's
Lord
not
knows,
going to twist it.
Right. Kathleen wants to clear you. You
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
they want what really happened. They don't want to
Yes.
just make a narrative. They want what truly happened. All Kathleen
Well, look
knows
at
is
Josh
Steven's
Randall.
innocent.
Josh Randall was a suspect, and Zellner pretty much cleared him and Ma'am too. So that's proof in the pudding that if they step forward and they're innocent, they have nothing to fear. And that goes for Ryan Hilligus.
Correct. Right. I mean, and same goes for Steven. You know, she put him through the ringer before she knows she's going to take this case and believe in this case because she doesn't want a guilty client.
Right, right. Okay, I want to clear this up. Thank you, Roll, so much for giving us this. Roll Griffin also says Jason shot himself, but he did not hang himself. So now we know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that. Then we know. Finn says, but it is my understanding that ST means Scott Tadich does not like Stephen. So why would he want to help his attorney? Good point. Now, let's get into that a little bit. We actually believe, Jax, on our channel, we believe in understanding the dynamics of the family in order to understand how people react. I mean, something could look really suspicious unless you knew, well, they never got along from day one, So in that, how was Stephen's relationship when he was out? Did he even know Scott Tadich?
No, He knew of him. There was no relationship there. You have to remember that Barb was married to Tom Yonda, and she was having an affair with Tom's cousin, Scott Toddick. So
Okay.
her what she was doing with Scott was on the down low. So there was no bringing Scott to like family events or anything like that. So Scott did not know Steven at all. Or even look at when Scott testifies, he doesn't know which one of Barb's sons does that he sees out there by the fire and doesn't know the kids' names. So Scott had zero interaction. He's going off of things after the fact. And he always talks about or when I used to talk to Scott, he hates Steven for whatever reason. He just doesn't like him.
Well, okay. So I'm kind of playing this through in my head a little bit about when the entire investigation was kind of blowing up. And we get to the part to where Brendan is starting to get questioned here and there. Now, I believe the school one happened without Barb's knowledge. However, when even the other interviews happen, Barb is always along with Blaine. But you don't see her kind of doing the same thing with Brendan. Have you or do you know anything about if she had a different relationship with Brendan compared to the other children, or what dynamics are we looking at there? Or is something, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't, of course, you don't have to answer either.
I believe that Barb loves all of her boys equally. That she truly loves her sons. I think that she isn't the smartest person, and she also was manipulated by law enforcement. So there's times that she didn't know they were questioning Brendan, like pulling him out of school. And then there are times that she did know, but then or they would purposely question Brendan when Barb is in court divorcing Tom Yonda. And
So they were actually questioning Brendan when Barb cannot be at two places at once.
correct. And then there's another time when Barb is there that they tell her it's best for you not to go in there. And she listened to them instead of going in there and protecting her son. Um,
Okay.
but that was just her listening to law enforcement. But they also had stuff over her because she had been busted recently with a lot of marijuana. So
Okay.
they had that to use on her as well. And her charges were dropped for whatever reason. I don't know how that came about, but it was.
Right. So Rachel Knapston writes, I found it interesting the phone call Barb was on with Stephen. She never mentioned Brendan, but talks about Bobby. Hmm,
What what was
that's
that?
true. Um, so the call on Ma'am too. Rachel's talking about that call between Barb and Stephen. That Barb talked about Bobby the whole time and never even brought up Brendan.
Well, I think Stephen was talking about Bobby, to be
I do
fair.
too. I do too.
I think that
Right.
was the topic of conversation.
Yeah. Well, that is because Stephen, as he says, he's following the evidence. The evidence is pointing to Bobby. So Stephen just keeps saying to Barb, why aren't you all coming forward?
Right.
Because, Stephen is rotting away in prison. So
Yeah.
why can't you just come forward and get cleared?
And
And
on that call, she states it. She actually admits on that phone call, yeah, she left. She left. And Steven says, well, why didn't you guys say that? And she says, say it when? And he says, in court or in the trial. Yeah, if this woman left and Bobby knew it, then he was right behind her.
right. Well, and that's something that Barb keeps doing is, the family really shouldn't be on social media saying anything at
No.
all, because Barb has totally blown up everything that Bobby has ever testified to by saying, I talked to him and he said he saw her leave. And it's like, but that's not what he testified to. He testified that he didn't see her leave. So what is going on here? So you have to understand then Steven's frustration that these are his family members, and they're saying one thing that puts him in prison, but now they're saying something opposite. So why wouldn't you go to Kathleen and say, yeah, no, I did see her leave. Law enforcement got me confused. Law enforcement made me say this. So, if Bobby was innocent, go to Kathleen, and Kathleen will clear you and help you. But all Steven's seeing is everybody else is living their life out here and he's in prison and they don't seem to care.
And last night when we were all kind of talking with you as to, making sure all the technical stuff worked and stuff, you made such an interesting comment, and it kind of stuck with me throughout the day. And I think the listeners need to hear it. And that is, when Stephen thinks of the internet, how does he describe your channel, the Stephen Avery Project? Explain
So
that a little bit.
Stephen Avery Project, he always refers to as his website. He
I'm not trying to laugh, but that's so innocent. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And he has told me when he is free, he will have the internet, but for work purposes, he doesn't want it personally. He wants nothing to do with it. He doesn't get it. He hates all the drama that the internet does. But he doesn't have a firm grasp on what all these Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all that stuff. He doesn't get it, and it's understandable.
Yeah. Um, I totally, he's been in a lockdown situation that he wouldn't even have a grasp of
Yeah,
what the
for most
internet
of his
really
adult life.
is. Yeah.
For most of the time that the internet existed, he's been locked up.
So Jax, another thing is I know that all the calls are always monitored, obviously, when they're in prison, especially I'm sure Stevens. So when you get on calls with him, do you ask case related questions or do you steer clear of them? How do you handle the call? What kind of conversations do you know that are comfortable for him? Does he express his feelings on like what it'd be like to be out in the freedom? And I mean, what does he say to you?
Steven is like an open book. He will talk about anything. He will talk about the case. He will talk about what he wants to do when he gets out. I personally, because Steven will say anything, I try to steer him away from case stuff, because it's not that
Right.
I don't want to know. I'm nosy and I want to know this, oh, what does Kathleen say? All that stuff. I would
Yeah.
love to know, but knowing that the phone calls are recorded, I don't want
And they're
him to
waiting
say,
for bated breath to find out.
right.
Yeah.
So I don't want him to say anything that could hurt his case. We do discuss things. There's things that him and I talk about case wise that I don't talk about. I don't put it out there. There's stuff that Steven has asked me to put out there at times, and I have not, because I go by what Kathleen says. And so if Steven says something that I'm not sure of, I will reach out to her and ask her, because yes, it's Steven's life, but he doesn't necessarily know what is best for him legally. That's Kathleen's department. So I will always defer to her on those kinds of things.
Right, that's very
That's
wise.
so
Yes.
why. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect, BB. Yeah, I was going to say that you spoke very much what I was going to say. So, when Stephen talks, about his plans, does he plan on doing something in the auto business? What type of future plans does Stephen have when he does get his freedom?
Um, he still wants to do something in auto salvage. But he doesn't want to stay in Wisconsin. When I first started talking to him, he was going to stay in Wisconsin. Then it changed to he'll leave Wisconsin, and now he's even said he would consider leaving the country. But he
I am
does.
so glad to hear that, Jax. I can't tell you how glad I am to hear that.
So, but he likes to work. He likes to be kept busy. So
Yeah.
he's going to be working on cars, so that's going to happen in some form.
Well,
And it really is so important to do things that give you meaning, like regardless of, what point of life you're at, just to engage in things that give your life meaning. I mean, I think we all know that at parts of our lives where we've lost something, to engage in things that are meaningful to us and that give us some sense of achievement or joy actually can ground us a lot. And
right.
that will be really important for him.
So, Jax, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And you don't have to answer this, or you can just give us a clue or whatever you want to do. But in this case, do you in your mind somewhere have a suspect in your mind that did this?
Oh, yeah, it's Bobby.
Okay.
I'm convinced.
I didn't want to put you too much on the spot, but I was
Oh,
just
no.
dying to know.
It's Bobby, and with help from Scott, I do not believe Scott committed the crime. I think he helped after the fact. What Barb knows, that I'm not sure on. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt that she was not a willing participant in putting Brendan in prison. But
Lordy.
I but there is always the case of that Bobby was 19, Brendan was 16. Brendan had a low IQ. She may have been convinced that this was the best road to go on, thinking that Brendan would be charged as a juvenile and he would just serve the 2 years and get out at 18. But I really hope that that's not.
Well, I've always had a problem. The biggest problem how do I put this nicely? The biggest problem I have ever had with Barb has been that little statement she made to the judge.
Yes.
And that was,
Yeah.
maybe you could have given him a few years for his story. What?
Oh, boy.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
What in the world for his story? It was a story. It was nothing but. Even the investigators, Uyghur and okay, Jax, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the Dr. Silkman video that Braun and Dr. Silkman did together. Braun and Silkman researched a lot about Brendan in an intense way, and they compared it to what Brendan had stated, which was, where did you get this information? And he said, from a book. And they said, what book would that be? And he stated, Brendan said, Kiss the Girls. So the two of them paired up on their own. It became their passion. They came and told me about it. They're like, we're going to work on a project. We'll bring you back a video. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be wonderful. I'll get to be an audience member. So I was very excited. When they were done, I was shocked because no matter what you think about of this case, this book foretells everything the cops have accused Brendan and Stephen of doing. Specifically, it's so strange. So then they verified that, yes, indeed, when Brendan was at Fox Hills in that motel, that resort, whatever it is, they did have cable and they had the movie playing that weekend. It was playing for the whole month of October. And check this out.
Yeah, it was
In
playing
this time frame,
10 days before she went missing. And then the other day I found out it was playing the Sunday afternoon, which was, I think, around the 26th. I think it was Sunday, the
Yes.
26th of February. So it was the
Well, and
Sunday
we
that was
had
in the
seen
middle
it.
after the afternoon.
We had seen it many places too
Many,
when we
many.
were looking. Yeah.
But
Yeah, it was the
what
26th of February, though, and he was taken to Fox Hills on the 27th.
yeah. Okay, check this out, you guys. What is said by the investigator keys us in if you pay attention. He said to Brendan, let the video play out in your head.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's just hypothetically say that the investigators have a child with a lower IQ, very susceptible to suggestion, and they're aware of it because they've already talked to the school psychologist who is mandatorily part of an IEP team. This is
Yeah.
an individual education program. Let me tell you, my son's been in the has an
The
IEP
report
team
was
and so
there.
has yes. So
The report was there by that point.
they
Hmm.
absolutely know how susceptible. Now, what if I'm going out there on the limb? This is to make us think about this to understand it. What if they were like, Brendan, have a seat right here? One of them put on the TV knowing it was going to play, said, want a soda or something? We'll go get you one. He's like, I'll take a water. They leave. They leave him just long enough locked in that room to get that film rolling. Now they pressure the individual to come up with a murder scene, or he's not going to get to go be with his family. He's not, whatever their ruling was that they were, you know, you want this over, you got to do this, whatever. Is it possible? Because we have Brendan later stating he got it from a book. Well, it's also a movie and a book, and it's in their library right there in that town.
Yeah.
It just
I
floors me.
I uh, I wouldn't be shocked by it at all. There's just so much here. But something I should mention though on that is I met one of the other Dassey boys, Brian Dassey, who you don't ever hear from. He's not on social media. He just wants to live his life. And
There's
so
only one picture on the internet. No, two pictures I know of Brian.
okay. So I asked him about, was he questioned, all that. And he said he was questioned and he was pressured into saying things, but he
I
didn't take
know.
the bait. So all the Dassey boys were
Yeah,
all
they were
treated
all.
that way.
That's right.
Brendan's just the one that was susceptible to it. And I believe they initially started on Brendan because Brendan is Steven's alibi. So I think when police started to talk to Brendan, it was only because they wanted Brendan to implicate Steven, to try and say he saw something, heard something, Steven said something to him, something like that. But
I completely
Brendan,
agree. And then it
Bren-
switched.
right, and Brendan not understanding their cues of just guessing at
Hmm.
what they want him to say, he then said something that implicated himself
Yeah,
on
I think
He
he put
didn't know
accident.
himself
better. He
into
didn't
the
even know
fold.
what their plan. I mean, you can tell when he says, "Why didn't you tell us that, Brendan?" And he says, and it's about her being shot in the head.
Right,
And the child says, "I could not think of it."
right,
Yeah.
right,
Not I couldn't remember it. I
Now,
couldn't think of it.
if you come in the kitchen, there's chocolate all over the place. The kid doesn't have any chocolate on him, not a drop of chocolate on him, but there's chocolate everywhere. And you say to the child, why didn't you tell me that you were going to make this big mess and this chocolate is everywhere? Why didn't you tell me? And they say, I could not think of it. As a parent, immediately you're like, well, crap, this isn't the kid that did it. I got to find somebody else.
yeah,
Mm.
Because you know, if the child could not think of it, they weren't participating in the event.
right,
Just as a parent, you know that. As a mother, as a father, you're like, well, if they couldn't even think of it. I mean, really, honestly. And then when you really look at the synopsis of the entire situation, they're using trusted figures in Brendan's life to coerce him more. So they're finding the bus driver where the mother, from the beginning of time, school starts, we hand that kid off not to the teacher. We hand that kid off to the bus driver and we threaten that child. Every one of us has been there that's ever had a kid ride the bus and we get anything oh, your kid's not doing something. You're like, I swear to God, I'm not driving you to school. So you had better be listening to that bus driver. She's trying to drive the bus. So it's an established trust thing that the parents ingrain in the child. And that is the first event. Dr. Silkman recently also did a video on that. And that's the first event where we see Brendan finally just kind of break. He just gives up when they start pushing that bus driver's testimony, which we now know was not what she was saying, because she was talking about the van being up by two other vehicles.
Mhm.
We know that's at the front, at the end of Avery Road, which is nowhere near the Dassies. You actually have to take a long, long driveway, and you have to go way down there by the two trailers to be able to be where the real van was that was in question. But as a bus driver's describing Whitney seeing the woman taking the pictures, she's describing it by two vehicles. Now we know the van had been up there weeks and weeks before. So she's
Mhm.
questioned the bus driver. Well, could it have been those times? Well, yeah, it could have been a few weeks ago. Yeah, yeah. But they don't tell Brendan that. No. What they tell Brendan is, Brendan, the bus driver saw her. You mean how many people were on that bus? I don't know, 17. Well, 17 and the bus driver saw her, but you saw her too. You know you did. He finally says, yeah. He just can't take it anymore. And the minute he said yeah, they
Well,
run with it.
actually, what I discovered is that we have Baldwin, investigator Baldwin, who uses a technique that I used to use for it's called guided imagery for relaxation. And she says, it's a beautiful day. You're getting off the bus. Um, you see the lady taking the photos, and everyone else does on the bus. Everyone else on the bus
That's
does
almost
too.
subliminal hypnotist.
Well, it is. It's actually, like I said, it's guided imagery. You're
Why
actually
why were
putting
you doing that though?
images
What are you
in.
just doing it for a relaxation technique or something?
Yeah, that's right, for
Okay, she
relaxation.
was using it nefariously, if you ask me.
Absolutely, because it is directly after. So when you look through the transcription, you can see it a little bit more clearly. Detective O'Neill gets back in the car after talking to Skolinski and getting that information. He tries to get Brendan to agree. Brendan's going, "Oh no, sometimes I'm talking to Blaine," and then you see, and then she does that, and he says, "Yeah, maybe." But I'm not sure. And then O'Neill starts in again and he says, maybe. And then Detective Baldwin's out of the car, reporting in, I would suspect.
Yeah. Hmm.
So you can see it happening. And he's a sitting duck for this sort of thing, unfortunately, just because of his vulnerability.
So does Stephen mention Brendan ever anymore to you, or is it something you avoid talking to him about, Jax, or
Um, when I visited him a couple weeks ago, he says he's actually thinking of writing to Brendan.
I
Um,
think that would be great.
but he's never really talked about Brendan much before. So this was a new development.
Right, right. I
Must
think it
cause
would
him
show
so
some
much pain.
support, you know. I think it would show support for Brendan. I I think they're both victims, and I think that they're as much as a victim as the victim. Their lives have been ruined and taken away, and their innocence has been absolutely stolen. I consider them hostages of the state, actually. Just
Oh,
like any wrongfully convicted person, I consider a hostage of the state they're in.
right. Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
Do you know how Brendan feels about Stephen?
I haven't talked to Brendan in a long time because his mom cut off access to him. Um,
Yeah.
but he didn't really ever talk about Stephen either. And Brendan, when
Mm,
I talked to him, I did not talk about the case to him at all.
no.
It's
He'd be
just
very in the moment.
he, it's not something he wants to talk about. He's confused. He doesn't understand it. So when I would
Yes.
talk to Brendan, he's talking about, I mean, Pokemon. really. He's talking about
Yeah.
I feel
Pokemon
like
and
he hit it
favorite
hard, isn't he?
food. Yeah. So really, so, and I just
Brendan
don't
likes
want.
Pokemon.
He loves Pokemon. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. I'll have to find out. I've never drawn anything in email letters because I get worried they won't let him have it then. Do you know, can we draw things? Because I could draw Pokemon in the letters then, you
Oh
know?
yeah, absolutely you can.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome to know because I actually
Someone was
enjoy that a lot. Oh,
someone
I
was
want to,
drawing him their own comics,
okay,
but they had to be careful of the content because they couldn't send him comics because they
right.
kept cutting out sections that weren't appropriate, and then the comic got ruined. So they decided to make their own comics. I remember reading that, which I thought was a really lovely idea. So they wrote Brendan
Also, I
his
think there's
own comic.
something about certain color inks might be drugs that you could hide and stuff.
I'll have to read up on that. I don't know.
Yeah, certain prisons won't let you send stuff that's in color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ashley Holtz, she says, I love this. My two favorite ma'am people together in one conversation. Jax and Rubberducky are my top two favorites when it comes to ma'am.
Well, thank you,
Mhm.
Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
That's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
Jax and I have always liked each other for a long time, and when she agreed to do this, I think I didn't sleep a wink. To be honest, it was like I had to work today, and I at 4 o'clock when I normally like stick around for a few minutes and visit everybody that comes on shift. You know how you do at work, you chit chat. Not me. I don't even think they knew where I went. Like my apron dropped, and I was poof. They were like, "Where'd she go?" I was gone.
Well,
Uh,
I need to tell you, one of my Stephen Avery project moderators just messaged me wanting me to tell you guys about one of the Hallback sisters.
oh, please do share.
Okay, so when I was visiting Stephen, he told me that not all the Hallbacks think he is guilty. And I said, "Really? How do you know this?" And he said one of their boyfriends is in prison with him. And while
Wow.
we are sitting there, he says, "Yeah, see her over there, and when you go visit an inmate, you have to give them your sheet and then they tell you what table you're assigned to go to, and then that's where you meet up with the inmate." So there was a girl standing up there by the officer, and he says, "That's a Hallbach." Now, he doesn't tell me which Hallmark it is. She's a younger girl, so I'm assuming it's one of Teresa's younger sisters. And he says, "Yeah, that's her right there." And then she walks right behind Steven. So the table we were at was like in the middle of the place. So she did not need to go anywhere near Steven. And she walked behind him and she says, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?"
Aw. You
Yeah.
guys, if the Hallbox and the Averys on some small level can be kind enough to each other like that, then all the rest of the truthers are one united front. Just do it. Just do it. Support each other. If it's not the way that somebody else does their business, is they research just theory or they just fact, whatever. Just do your own thing and keep forward because all of us are united. I mean, look how amazing it is when we get a resource like Jax to come on here to share with us all this information we would have never known. It only helps the case, to be able to inspire us to get to the bottom of stuff.
Well,
Mm.
it was my biggest takeaway because if you killed my sister, I'm going to walk a big wide berth around you, and I'm sure not going to exchange pleasantries with you. I would be
Agreed.
afraid of you and not go anywhere near you. So for her to walk directly behind him and then say, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" It's like, oh my God. So what is because the Hallback family is a big mystery and something people always want to question on,
Yeah.
how do they feel on things? Why don't they say anything? What do they really think? So this was just something like, that I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And then I said, and how does then the boyfriend treat you? And Steven said they're not really anywhere near each other in the prison. So he rarely sees the guy. So there's no interaction between him and that guy. But he'll see the hallback girl at visits.
That's
Mm.
incredible.
That's really quite lovely. And I think I took a leaf out of Stephen's book in the way he just says, look, we go where the evidence goes, and it's not about accusing people. It's about looking at the evidence and letting the evidence take us where it does. There's not a lot of evidence, but I really don't like kind of trying to construct stories around the evidence and trying to, I guess, we've only got a few dots. I don't like trying to connect dots because we don't have many dots. But if we can just look at the dots and see what the dots tell us, that's kind of how I'm feeling about the whole case, is if we can just look at the evidence and see what it can tell us, and hopefully there'll
That's
be more as
what
time
Ron
goes on.
Ron, everybody's going to do it their own way. And I respect your way 100%, and I do it differently, and you respect my way. And we're part of the same research team. And there's times when Ron and I absolutely agree on everything, and we're wonderful with each other. And there's times when Ron and I disagree, and we're still on the same team. We still 100% support each other. We're both ducks of a feather, and we stick together all the time, but we disagree often. It's the same with BB. BB and me, we disagree at times. BB and Braun disagree at times. And it doesn't matter. There's not one person in our entire research team that I can match up with another person and say, these two people, they research the same, they believe the same, da 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 da. Nope. I can honestly tell you, it gets to be some very, very big discussions in our research groups, and then we all disperse. We'll actually get challenged sometimes, in our arguments. We'll be like, no, I know I read that, I know I did, and hold on, I'll be right back, and you can't find it, so you're gone for like a half a day. You come back and you're like, I found it. And all that does is spur us to dig deeper into the case itself, to prove ourselves that what we read, we know we have the copy of it, so forth. But I think the diversity that is within the truthers, it should be respected, in that we all need to have that diversity to get to the bottom of this. And so when it comes to the guilters, which honestly I have not seen many of them lately, they're as quiet as a state for us. We don't see them very often. At this point, come on, bring it on. I want to talk about some evidence with them. All right, because if you're a guilter, let's talk about the bullet. Go ahead, talk to me about the bullet.
And with all the diversity, you also never know when somebody's going to have another piece to the puzzle that you really need.
That's the truth, and that has happened. We've had a situation where we've had this researcher had this theory and had done this research, and they knew this part. And then researcher B walked in. They knew nothing that the other person knew. They have the other side of the story. And when the two stories come together, you get goosebumps in a way, because you're like, whoa, now we get it. One of the things I want to bring up, and if you're interested in the movie, you'll be able to watch it. Otherwise, you'll be able to hear it here. One of the things that I'm personally pursuing, besides ma'am and stuff that we're doing, but next week, is it bothers me very much how the police department, the law enforcement, I should say, Wiegert and Fassbender and such, and the DCI are handing sodas to Stephen that are Mountain Dew, Mountain Dew. They even make a big deal in their reports about he drank another Mountain Dew, blah, 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 Mountain Dew, Mountain Dew. Now we go to a salvage yard. We're finding the plates in this beat up old red station wagon. And out of this entire salvage yard, they only found one pop can to put it in evidence. And guess what kind it is?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the last thing that happens before Steve Avery got arrested, and they actually told him what the complaint of the arrest was going to be, which was that it was a felony charge because he had possession of a firearm. He literally is given a Mountain Dew right then. And when the conversation is done, They say, here, what do you think they're doing? They're taking the soda can. What is on the soda can? Well, you can't say it's not going to be important. For God's sake, we've used the cherry soda can out of the wrap to confirm the ID of the victim because saliva is a huge, rich DNA source. You can't say, well, the soda would have contaminated. We just got done telling you the victim's identity was locked in on a triangular method using three forms of DNA, and one of them was the cherry soda can. So I find it very suspicious that out of an entire salvage yard and all these homes they've gone through, and this 3 billion page reports all over the place, we find one soda can. And it's the same time frame within the day of them saying, hey, Stephen, you're under arrest. You want to hand over your can?
Mm.
Now, what would be the point? We don't see anybody say anything about the can. Well, you'd have to do if you were being nefarious, I don't know, let's pretend I'm a lab tech and maybe I have a conflict of interest and I look like crap now because I sent somebody to prison I shouldn't have because I didn't do my job right. Well, if you give me that soda can, can't I just swab it and then just put RAV4 hood and hand it off to somebody? And then later they go, ha ha, here it is. Well, Zellner goes, she tests this entire theory out, and she said that when they swabbed Stephen's mouth and they got the DNA results, that it matched exactly, strength and all. It's that rich of a source that it matches his saliva.
There you
So
go.
I'll be doing a movie on that soon, you guys. You won't miss anything if you don't see it because I just told you it all. But I'm gonna be showing you the forms where he's being the actual interview and all of this kind of stuff so that you can see it. We'll be looking at pictures of it, talking about the Mountain Dew. But that has, in the last few days, it has rocked my world. When I got to the queso and they're talking about this Mountain Dew can that they picked up, and we're in a salvage yard, and it's the only pop can that they collect out of. You're telling me there was no litter?
Oh, there's litter.
And they wouldn't even have known why collect it? It's laying in the grass. You've had how many people searching this property on the outskirts, blah, 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 blah. How would you even know whose DNA it was? Why collect it?
Right.
Oh.
And it's never used in the case. It's just slid into evidence. So, Um, okay, so there's a couple more, kind of one of those I wish I knew this kind of stuff. So with your visits with Steven and stuff like that, um, does he like have a lot of visitors? Does he get a lot of mail? Does he know how the world is supporting him? Does he have a true understanding of how many people are trying really hard on a daily basis to help him? Or does Stephen I mean, I don't know how he interprets all of it.
Um, he thinks he knows, but he truly can't grasp how big this is. I've told him, I'll tell him about all the different countries and everything that we get at Stephen Avery Project, and he does get a lot of letters. So he has an idea, but he just until he's free, he's not going to truly understand just how big he has in a support system. As for visits, he's only allowed so many people on his visitors list. And then he's only allowed this many during the week. And then on weekends, he's only allowed one visit on the weekend. But, that one visit on the weekend, I think it's as many as 6 people could attend that at one time. Um, and then once you're on the visitors list, you're on there for 6 months. And so, like, when he added me, if he decided, well, no, he's got so and so he wants to put on, you can't remove me for 6 months. So, so he doesn't get a whole lot of visits, but he makes a lot of phone calls. There's a lot of people that he talks to.
Wow. Okay, that's really good. I'm really relieved to know that he has an outlet to be able to, get his mind outside of those walls and interact with people. I really feel some relief, I guess, from that. And I didn't know that. I wasn't sure how that worked. Um, so when do you kind of like know ahead of time what you're going to talk about when you talk to Steven? Like, is there a lot of times you're like, oh, what do I want to talk to him about? Or does he pretty much carry the conversation? How does that work?
Um, no, I don't pre-plan anything on what I'm going to say. I do not know when Steven is going to call me. I know there's other people that have like a standing Steven's going to be calling me at this day on this day every week at this time. Steven knows I'm available for whenever he needs me. There's times that there's been months since I've heard from him. But I'll use the example of yesterday. So I was in Chicago with a friend of mine and we were walking to lunch and that's when Steven called me. So she's there next to me as we're walking as I'm talking to him, and then afterwards when the call's done she's like, you talk to Steven like you guys are like besties or something. And I just said, well, I just talk to him like I talk to anybody else. I don't treat him any differently. I have a potty mouth. And so, I don't censor myself when I talk to him. I swear and whatever, and I joke and I'll tease Steven. And he's got a great sense of humor. And the conversation just goes wherever it's going to go. And I'll always ask him if there's anything he needs me to do or something he needs me to post. Um, and we'll talk about the case somewhat, and we'll
Can
talk about other things.
Hey Jax, can you do us a favor?
What?
Can you tell Steven hi from all the duckies in the world?
Oh, absolutely.
Just tell him that we are the rubber ducks because rubber duck is the most innocent thing we think of, and that's how we feel about him and Brendan.
Well, I actually told him yesterday that I was going to be doing this the next day.
Did you
So,
really?
yeah.
I hope he knows that, I'd love Brendan to know too that our hearts are in this to see it to the end and make sure they get home. So I want to give a quick shout out to someone that I've been following on Twitter, and their name is Finn. And they have been dedicated and they are doing 80 things. And I find that so commendable. Um, that's dedication. You think, well, I can think of 80 things. Oh, go ahead, try it. Try try putting it in words and sticking to it on a daily routine. I just think that the diligence and the perseverance to do it is incredible. And they've also stated that when the Mammothon was done, and this went right to the canteen, to the guys, they raised over $5,000. So, congratulations for all the supporters that donated to Stephen and Brendan's canteen. That's really, really wonderful because like Jax had mentioned this yesterday, but I also know my own sister one time did not pay child support. And she found out the hard way that you set some time for that. And what she learned is you even have to pay for salt, and it's per meal. And so when you think, well, surely when they're in there, they get taken care of. No, 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 no. You need money for a lot of things. And you don't have a job on the outside where you get paid, 10, 20, $30 an hour. You get paid very little per day, and it has to go for your own shelter too. So they really do need support in there. And the fact is, they're not guilty of a crime. So they've been robbed of their chance to support themselves. And so I really think that it's wonderful that whenever any of the money goes to Zellner's account or to Stephen or Brendan's canteen, because I feel like that lets them know they don't have to worry about stuff. We're going to carry them through. We're going to keep working on the case, you know.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Jax, we're at 10:18, and I know you have not been feeling well. You are under the weather.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a big trooper for doing this. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Um, it's been an honor to be part of this with all the armchair sleuths and you as well. But to always know that you've survived as long as you have with all the shin kicks and the, dirt in your face kind of attitude, and you still persevere and you push and you do it without self gain. You just do it. You just stay on the track of the truth and you walk that straight line. And I I hold you up a little bit and say, this is this when I get on my, I've been kicked. I've been knocked to the curb. I've had things said about me. I've heard people go on lives and say, oh, it's open duck season or whatever. It doesn't bother me because I don't, I love all the supporters that support Stephen and Brendan. But to be honest, I read the castle and I do the videos and I do all that, not because of who I am wanting to be famous for being a rubber duck. Because believe it or not, you guys, I'm not a rubber duck. I'm a human. I do it same reason Jack's
Oh,
does.
shush, don't tell everyone. Oh,
Like that guy, he said he wanted to. He said something like he'd rest easier if once he knew what I look like. So I told him, I said, close your eyes, relax. I'll tell you what I look like. Just picture soft yellow feathers.
That
Um,
one absolutely killed
yeah,
me.
yeah. But the fact
you
is, that's
idiot.
what we do because we're trying to help the case out. And if you guys are brand new to the case and you're wanting to help out, don't feel that if you get confused that you are not going to catch on, because I have a secret to tell you guys. We've been in it for a long time and we're even more confused than you after reading this case. So just ask any question you want of anybody. 99% of the people that are truthers are going to try and help you if you're new, because our goal is public awareness. And for every single person that gets on board with this, it means that we've got more eyes on Stephen and Brenda and keeping them safe. We've got more pressure on the state of Wisconsin to work with Zellner. We've got more pressure on those individuals that will not remove themselves from the suspect list because they won't work with Zellner at this point. So we put pressure on everybody to conform to the idea that if you were in this boat, how would you feel if you couldn't talk in court and defend yourself and you're listening to Kratz talk about this entire scenario and you're like, this is the biggest crock of crap I've ever heard in my life. And I'm going to go to prison for life because this big fat Humpty Dumpty can run his mouth to a poisoned jury pool and get the jury to accept whatever he wants. I mean, DNA back in 2005 was still mystical. They could have said anything they wanted about DNA. Jury would have bought it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to educate. The DNA is so important in your lives, you guys. One thing I will suggest as a human being, a lot of Americans and a lot of people all over the world, wherever you're from, whatever country you're from, have no clue what your blood type is. You need to know. You need to know about yourself. I do a lot of not related to the Stephen Avery case. I study a completely different type of case, and it is related to blood work. And it is imperative that you know your blood type. And I would recommend, honestly, and I'm not going to name a name, but I would recommend not submitting your DNA to any online sites because guess where your DNA is going? Into the CODIS. Just so you know. Uh-huh. All right, guys. So, Jax, again, from the bottom of my heart, and I want to thank BB for being here with us. And also, I want to thank Braun for being here with us. Braun, you have done so much amazing work behind the scene. You go quietly and you research and you do a bunch of stuff, and then your voice is hardly ever heard in public. And I don't think anybody really hears BB's voice that much either. But the truth is, you guys do an immense amount of work on this case, and we want to thank you guys.
Hey, no problem.
Thank you.
I'm nosy by nature, so yeah.
Thanks
Well,
for the chat today, Jax. It was fantastic.
Well, thanks for having me. I
I hope you'll
appreciate it.
come back soon.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
really.
Yeah.
We do this every
And
Saturday
you,
night around 7 o'clock. We usually trying to end it. We go to a live chat back in Discord where those that are listening can go on there and actually chat with us in voice, or if they're kind of shy, they can type. So everybody's welcome to that, and that channel's been posted. And I thank you guys, all the viewers and listeners that support Stephen. Please do me a favor, like I always say, I don't care if it's my site or somebody else's site. Please continue to share any good information about Stephen, about Brendan, about the case. Keep these guys right in the spotlight to keep them safe. So, with that, if you know the saying, you can say it with me. I'm just going to say it. If you didn't do the crime, you shouldn't do the time.
New
Do the
Thanks,
time.
you
time,
guys.
indeed.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.